If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description. Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Brandon Lawson series. This is episode 1, A Texas Mystery. And the Brandon Lawson case, one of the most popular true crime cases online, hasn't quite been covered in the mainstream media quite as extensively as some other cases, but we have a 911 call, we have a lot of different theories revolving around drug activity, corrupt law enforcement, and state troopers, of course. I mean, again, there's a reason certain cases are solved and certain cases are unsolved. And it never ceases to amaze me how many so-called true crime aficionados do not spend time specifically studying which cases had police corruption and which cases did not. Now, I'm not saying there's police corruption here. There could just be fallibility on the side of humans. What a shocker. And people's egos preventing that fallibility from being exposed. Just classic human psychology, not really all that mind-shocking, yet it causes certain coincidence theorists to just go bonkers and get triggered and start calling people thinking critically conspiracy theorists. You see this in a lot of true crime cases. But we will be examining this case in typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, remaining objective, logical, and neutral in this scientific examination of the Brandon Lawson case, officially unsolved. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, or you can just go to youtube.com/Mindshock or youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime. To keep awareness up in this case and other cases, hit that like button, share the podcast across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. All right, so let's do the quick overview. And information has come out over the years. There have been a few updates here and there. But there's a certain shroud of mystery around the case that we will be attempting to cut through to find the truth here. So just from the wiki, August 8th, 2013, Brandon Lawson of San Angelo, Texas, disappeared after leaving his home earlier that night. Brandon Lawson arrived at his home in San Angelo, Texas, where he lived with his girlfriend of 10 years, Ladessa Lofton. Between approximately 10:45 and 11 p.m., Brandon and Ladessa argued. Brandon had not returned home the night before, and Ladessa believed that Brandon was on drugs at the time. At the time, Brandon had ongoing issues with substance abuse, but had been clean for about 6 months. Brandon's brother, Kyle Lawson, later claimed that Brandon had taken methamphetamines shortly before his disappearance. Around 11:30 p.m., Brandon called his father in Crowley, Texas, about a 3-hour drive from San Angelo, and told him he was coming to his house. At 11:54 p.m., Brandon left his house to go to his father's house, driving his silver Ford F-150. At about 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Brandon called Kyle and told him he had run out of gas and was pulled over on U.S. Route 277 between San Angelo and Bronte, Texas. Kyle claimed that during the call, Brandon told him that 3 expletives are chasing me out of town, and later clarified it was the Mexicans in the neighborhood. Kyle asked if he was hallucinating, which Brandon denied. Do hallucinating people know they're hallucinating, though? Kyle, along with his wife and 4-year-old child, drove to Ladessa's house and retrieved a gas can. Kyle said they continued to make calls to each other, but Brandon wouldn't hold a conversation with him, usually ending the call after a few sentences. And we will be examining exactly what that means. So there's ongoing calls here, but they're all really, really short. And Brandon's the one who just, again, couple sentences and the call. And they did that apparently multiple times, according to Kyle. And is that unusual in a missing persons case? Because I do not recall a case quite like this one. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon called 911, which rang at a local nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas. And he told the responder that he had run out of gas and he needed the police. The 911 call rang at a local nursing home. Is that where they operate a dispatch at them? During the call, Lawson made several confused or incoherent statements, including, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field." And then there's some speculation on this word or phrase here. Something pulled some guys over. And we'll be examining what that word is. Some people believe it's state troopers pulled some guys over, which lead down rabbit holes of law enforcement conspiracies. Anyway, so yes, I'm in the middle of a field. Something pulled some guys over right here going towards Abilene on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's no one. There's one car here. There's guys chasing, again, something into the woods. Please hurry. Several minutes later, 12:56 a.m., a trucker called 911 to report Lawson's truck, which was parked in a hazardous manner on the road. Between 12:50 a.m. and 1:15 a.m., Brandon received and made several calls with his brother, his girlfriend, his neighbor, and the 911 dispatcher, though his poor cell phone reception caused several of these calls to go straight to voicemail, and after 1:19 a.m., all calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. At around 1:18 a.m., Kyle called Brandon, who sounded out of breath and claimed he was bleeding. Shortly after 1 a.m., a sheriff's deputy arrived at Lawson's truck, though Lawson wasn't there. Kyle arrived at the truck around 1:10 a.m. 1:10 a.m. At the time, he was on the phone with Brandon, who told him, "I can see you. I'm right here." But neither the deputy nor Kyle could see Brandon. And how creepy is that? So Kyle's at the truck at 1:10 a.m. on the phone with Brandon Lawson, who's telling him, "I can see you. I'm right here." But neither the deputy nor Kyle could see Brandon. Is this like any other missing persons case ever? No, it is not. And it really does need some logical, comprehensive examination. At the time of the disappearance, Brandon had an active arrest warrant on him, and Kyle thought that he may have been hiding from the deputy. After talking to the officer, Kyle drove a short distance up the road and parked the car to wait for Brandon to appear, though after about 30 to 45 minutes, he left. Kyle left the gas can in the back of Brandon's truck and later returned to the truck at 5 a.m., where he was surprised that Brandon had not returned. Around 8 a.m., the truck was towed. So let's go over this scenario again. So Kyle believes Brandon is there looking at him a ways off through the trees. And so he drives a short distance up the road. So short distance, what can we assume that to be? A short distance. Why wouldn't Brandon appear at that moment? Because he's no longer with the deputy. Or is he that scared? Or is there something going on that we don't know about, as is usually the case in unsolved cases? In the aftermath of the disappearance, a local deputy organized a search party and spent several hours investigating the area near Lawson's truck, but found no signs of Lawson. Friends and family of Lawson set up a Facebook page called Help Find Brandon Lawson, which as of 2016 had over 12,000 likes. However, Lawson remains missing. And, okay. So, a lot of issues here. Very, very unique case, of course. A lot of things that don't make sense. And And before we go further down these avenues of exploration, I just want to touch on something I've touched upon in other cases. For whatever reason, a certain percentage of the populace says, oh, well, this individual was on drugs. Therefore, they just wandered somewhere, happened to die, accident, and nobody ever found him. Nothing to see here. All the searchers are incompetent. Everybody's always incompetent. And it was just a case of drug use. That's all there is to see. And this kind of silly Dunning-Kruger nonsense was really bizarre because someone who's on drugs and maybe not 100% in their right mind, if that was the case here, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but even if he was, does that make it more or less likely that he could be met with foul play? Same thing, we see in the Lisa Lam case, Emma Filipoff. There's a lot of cases where, for whatever reason, there are certain clueless goofballs out there that don't realize if you're on drugs out of your mind, if that's true. Again, we don't know if it is or it isn't if you weren't there. If that's true, does that make someone more or less of a target? Again, this isn't rocket science. Obviously, predators out there or shady individuals, people involved in drugs, crime, whatever, would they be more emboldened or more likely to act on someone who is a druggie and who is under the influence and might not be able to fight back, might not know where they are? They might assume, might not have as much friends or family to look for them. Who knows what the case may be? But it's just weird how a certain percentage of people hallucinate that people on drugs magically are marked and protected from foul play under any circumstances. Magically protected from any and all individuals that might do them harm. It's just really bizarre. A lot of clueless goofs out there. So let's continue here. I'm going to go over this pretty comprehensive write-up by Jordan Windnagel on thoughtcatalog.com, The Chilling Disappearance of Brandon Lawson. Brandon Lawson was 26 years old when he went missing on August 9th, 2013. It's a puzzling case for many reasons. Not only was Brandon in contact with his brother Kyle moments before he disappeared, but they were also in the same area, possibly yards apart. And that's, of course, quite heartbreaking. The basics are this. Brandon was in a fight with his long-term girlfriend, Ladessa, and left their home. His truck ran out of gas. He asked his brother to bring a gas can. When Kyle got there, Brandon was not in the vehicle. They spoke on the phone, and a police officer pulled up behind Brandon's truck. Brandon said to Kyle, "One time, run." According to Kyle, this means law enforcement run. Brandon was close enough to observe what was happening at his truck, but no one at the scene ever saw him. When Kyle refused to run from the cop, Brandon hung up on him. This detail makes the case even more confusing because Brandon himself called 911 before Kyle's arrival. You can listen to the 911 recording here, and this is what we will do now. And however, if there is, so whether he's on drugs or not, let's say he is, so he's extra confused. If there were state troopers that pulled someone over and there was some kind of situation, he might have thought this particular law enforcement officer was part of the corrupt law enforcement. So even though he called 911, either under the influence or not, there might have been some confusion on his part on which law enforcement officers were involved in which situation. And again, that's something that might not get discussed as much as it should. So let's go over the call.
911 emergency.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just pushing guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here and got chased to the woods. Please hurry.
Okay, now run that by me.
I'm not talking to him. I actually ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? 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 Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
So let's dissect this. Is it possible, if there is some kind of law enforcement cover-up, that this 911 call was edited? Because if you listen to the beginning of the call, it does sound like something was clipped out. Now imagine him saying state trooper just pulled some guys over.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. The safer just pushed some guys over. Safer just pushed some guys over. Safer just pushed some guys over. Safer just pushed some guys over.
If this was clipped, you wouldn't be able to tell state troopers. Or maybe it wasn't intentionally edited. Maybe the recording glitched. As they sometimes do. It's a cell phone. If the reception wasn't 100% perfect, it's possible there was a fraction of a second cut or half a second cut on state trooper just pulled some guys over. Let's listen to it again.
911 emergency.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. The safer just pushed some guys over.
It sounds like staper, not sniper, staper. State trooper? Staper? It does, I don't hear a deleted glitch, which, I mean, it's still possible, I guess, but it seems it might be more likely that this was professionally edited so that there's no pause in the word and that it'd be difficult to figure it out, because how often are people talking about it might be a state trooper? So, again, people involved in a conspiracy or a cover-up, they wouldn't necessarily be the greatest geniuses in all of history. So we don't know what they were thinking, how they were thinking, particularly if there's other variables involved. So if the call was edited, what could that mean, state trooper? Or again, if the call was not edited, regardless of whether there is or isn't corruption, if Brandon Lawson was either freaked out, adrenaline spiked, or on drugs, would he run the words together to the point where in his head it's making sense, but his mouth and tongue are just not making the right words? So he meant to say state trooper, but he's very agitated, so he just ran it together. Staper, staper, state trooper, staper, state trooper, staper. I don't know. Furthermore, if you listen, there's a second person. It sounds like someone is saying protect yourself in the background. So here's a call edited to remove the 911 operator and enhance some of the audio here. We can see a bunch of gunshots.
Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here and got shaken to the woods. Please hurry.
Okay, now run that by me.
I'm not talking to him. I actually ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? 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 Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance? Hello?
It sounds like someone in the background saying protect yourself, and then there's also a bunch of gunshots. And if this call was edited, it might be out of order too, because when they ask, do you need an ambulance? He says, yeah. Then he says, no. It almost sounds like his tone is different. It sounds like that could have been taken from a different part of the call. Let's listen again. Let's listen to this cleaned up version.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. The sniper just pushed some guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. The guys taking to the woods. Quick burning. And when I talked to him, I surely ran into him. That's the first guy.
You need an ambulance?
Yeah. No, I need the cops.
So was this type of situation where there's some state troopers? Maybe they're not. Maybe they weren't necessarily corrupt. Maybe not. There was some kind of drug activity going on. If they were innocent at that moment and something went down, did they think someone had a gun that didn't? They shot someone. Brandon Lawson happened to be there. Then they left or went chasing these other people, and they realized they shot somebody that wasn't armed. What was the situation there? And is this 911 call heavily edited? And for the people who believe there was no editing at all, it's just difficult to explain these things, the change in tonality, the second individual, I don't know, it's really, really tough. But let's continue here with the Thought Catalog article. Why did Brandon call for help and then tell Kyle to run from the officer? What is he trying to explain to the emergency dispatcher, and what events led up to this night? The phone call with Kyle would be the last time anyone ever spoke to Brandon Lawson. It's been over 7 years, and his disappearance remains unsolved. Another point here is during that 911 call, did the officers not act in a particular way that traumatized Brandon Lawson? I mean, who knows what was going down at the moment of the call, and then if these are really gunshots audible in the call, is that the state troopers shooting people? And then after that, when he's on the phone with Kyle, he's saying run from the officer because of what had happened during the 911 call. And at that moment, he no longer trusts the police, whereas when he was making the 911 call, he did trust the police. Is that a possible explanation? Here's the timeline of events. August 8th, 2013, approximately 10:45 to 11 p.m. Brandon and Ledessa argued. In the Missing Maura Murray podcast, Ledessa says the argument started because she believed Brandon was on drugs. She told him to get out. Kyle later confirms that Brandon had done methamphetamines prior to his disappearance. Brandon had ongoing issues with substance abuse and had previously been clean for 6 months. 11:54 p.m., Brandon leaves his house in San Angelo, Texas. It's believed he was heading to his dad's house near Fort Worth, Texas. August 9th, 2013, approximately 12:30 a.m., Brandon calls Kyle to say he ran out of gas while driving on US 277 toward Bronte, Texas. Kyle, with his girlfriend and son in the car, head over to Ledessa's because they need to pick up a gas can. 12:50 a.m., Brandon calls 911. 12:58 a.m., a passing truck driver calls 911 to report Brandon's abandoned truck on the side of the highway. The vehicle was parked in a hazardous manner with its tail end hanging over the white line. 1:18 a.m., Kyle calls Brandon to find his exact location. Brandon sounded out of breath, like he was running, and claimed he was bleeding. He told them to hurry before hanging up. Approximately 1:30 a.m., Kyle arrives at Brandon's truck, but he's not in the vehicle. While on the phone with Brandon, a police officer pulls up to the scene. Brandon says one time, "Run," to Kyle, to which Kyle responded that he wasn't going to run. Brandon said, "Where is your pride, mother," then hung up. That's another little detail that's usually not mentioned in other write-ups. Where is your pride, mother, ? And then he hung up after that. So, yes, so his mental state, there's a certain amount of wherewithal there. He's not so spaced out that he can't operate a phone and he can't explain what's going on. He said, and apparently he also saw him there with the officer and he's not far away. Is he going out in and out of some kind of mental state where he's traumatized by whatever happened with the officers? Did he get into a car accident with the state trooper? Or did another party pull up on him, other drug dealers, whatever? Was it a case of mistaken identity? Or was he involved in other drug dealers and they were after him? And police intersected that in some capacity, either corrupt, crooked police or not. Again, this is Mindshock. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So if you weren't there that night, you don't really know. So no need to get triggered by people going through possible theories. Most of the cases that become these highly talked about cases online that are as of yet unsolved, there might be missing unusual outlier variables in these cases, like possibly corrupt law enforcement, or people impersonating law enforcement, or CIs, all these things that coincidence theorists scoff at in their Dunning-Kruger stupors. These are the outlier cases. So that might be true in this case. Nobody's saying it's true across 90+% of all these other cases that are actually solved. So it's very interesting to see the psychological response from cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists whenever someone brings up a theory that there might be corrupt law enforcement involved. It's very telling. Some of these authority-worshipping cultists can't stand the very notion that it might be possible that there's law enforcement officers out there that are fallible and or corrupt. It's really weird. You see it in a lot of cases. So let's continue here. Approximately 1:30 to 4:30 a.m. The details are a little unclear during this time, but Kyle says that he drove up and down the highway looking for Brandon. At some point, he had to leave to get his son food. Afterward, he returned to search, possibly with friends. And it's weird, even in 2020, these details are unclear, whether he had friends or not to search. And again, what is the story with Kyle? Does he know a lot more than he has said? Was there some kind of hit put out on Brandon? And did it involve corrupt law enforcement? And did Kyle know about some of this, but not the corrupt law enforcement aspect of it? Approximately 4 a.m., Ledessa woke up and noticed multiple missed calls from Kyle, Brandon, and Brandon's mom. Her phone had been in her van because her only charger at the time was a car charger. Ledessa tries to call Brandon back, but his phone continuously rings. She assumes he doesn't have service. She eventually speaks to Kyle, and he tells her that he's at the truck, but they haven't been able to find Brandon. 7 a.m., Kyle puts gas in Brandon's truck and leaves. Approximately 8:30 to 9 a.m., the sheriff's department has Brandon's truck towed. So apparently it's parked in a hazardous manner. The other thing that kind of strikes out at me is, what if he had filled Brandon's truck with the gas right away and just left? Because if Brandon was still around, would he have entered the truck and then drove to his father's house? What else was going on that night? That seems to be there's missing variables here that we need to know. And other important details from this Thought Catalog article: Brandon had an outstanding warrant. Kyle believed this to be the reason that Brandon was hiding from the officer at the scene. He didn't know that Brandon had called 911, and he didn't realize how serious the situation was at the time. When Brandon told Kyle he was bleeding, Kyle assumed he had tripped or run into a cactus. I guess that's a common issue in Texas. Brandon never told him of an attack or anyone else present that night. Brandon had been experiencing paranoia that day. He told Kyle that Ledessa, quote, had people from their neighborhood after him, end quote. Ledessa doesn't know why Brandon said that, and Kyle is adamant that Brandon was simply being paranoid. Now, you know what's interesting there? How many times have so-called paranoid delusions have simply been awareness episodes? Now, there's a couple different possibilities here. Perhaps there were people from the neighborhood after them, and Ledessa didn't send them, but because they were fighting, Brandon thought that Ledessa did. So there could have really been people after him, but not sent by Ledessa. Or, of course, that could be true. Maybe they were sent by Ledessa. Again, I don't know any of these people. I wasn't there. I am not saying this is likely in any way. I'm saying I don't know if it's true. How can anyone verify this? And it probably can be verified. So the people that know Ledessa, if they checked everybody out in the neighborhood and they can verify that it was nobody from the neighborhood, perhaps he said neighborhood again because he's on drugs, and he didn't really mean their neighborhood. He meant some other neighborhood, but his brain is foggy. Either way, it's possible he wasn't being paranoid, because if there are some people after him, not from the neighborhood, even though he might have said neighborhood. Again, not everybody speaks perfectly clearly, especially when on drugs. Even when not on drugs, people that are scared or agitated, they don't always say everything with 100% accuracy if they're in an emotional state. So it's very possible people were after him either from his neighborhood or not from his neighborhood. Law enforcement initially suspected that Kyle was involved, either by helping Brandon run away or due to foul play. Kyle agreed to take a polygraph. He's been administered to and passed. And again, I've constantly spoke about brain fingerprint scanning, far superior to any polygraph test. Now, it's interesting that law enforcement suspected Kyle was involved. And it's weird. He's going up and down the highway searching for him. But if he was really involved, wouldn't he not be doing? Or do they believe at a certain point he found him and helped him get away? Or if law enforcement are involved in a cover-up, of course they're going to focus on someone like Kyle to take attention away from themselves. The area where Brandon disappeared has been searched many times, both on foot and from a bird's eye view. Thermal imaging cameras, plane searches, and cadaver dogs were all used in the days after a PI hired by the Lawsons also searched via helicopter. Sounds like a very thorough search. The terrain in the area where Brandon disappeared is extremely rough. It's known to be inhabited by wild hogs and rattlesnakes. This is Brandon's last known location. He was right next to the Colorado River, which was experiencing severe droughts at the time. The river was said to be knee-deep at its highest. Some listeners of the 911 call believe that they can hear gunshots in the background. Kyle says that's the noise of cars driving on the bridge over the Colorado River. Interesting. And it would be interesting if they did any reenactments where they recorded phone calls in that location to see, because if it's an uneven bridge and there's some kind of bumps and those are the gunshots, I don't know. He'd have to be really close to the highway, would he not? And why was there no rougher engine noise or truck noise or something? And how there's that many cars going over that bridge that late in the early morning? I don't know. It's weird. And there's Kickapoo Creek nearby too. Kickapoo High School, of course, where two of the Springfield 3 had graduated from. The Springfield 3 case. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. Mindshock covers that as well. Just thought it's kind of strange. There's a Kickapoo Creek right by the Colorado River, not far from where Brandon Lawson was last known to be. And yeah, there's a lot of fields in the area. There are people's properties around as well. It is strange. What can you say? It is very strange. Some people apparently have done some research, and I have not verified this to be true, but apparently that location, there's a local police officer who has property there. And there were property owners who also refused to allow their land to be searched. I believe at least one property owner refused to have their land searched. What that all means, I don't know. That's the last known location of a missing person. Landowners refusing a search. Also, this county is Coke County. You can't make this stuff up. So he was right. Okay. According to this San Angelo News article, Brandon withdrew his 401k before his disappearance. This is confirmed by Ledessa in the article, though she's unaware whether he received the money. His last paycheck was direct deposited on the night he went missing, and Brandon never withdrew that money. So what does that mean? And I'll go over that article in a moment as soon as I'm done with this one. None of Brandon's items, such as his phone, keys, or wallet, have ever been recovered. After helicopter searches, the Coke County Sheriff asserts that there was no sign of a struggle. One spot underneath a tree appeared to have indentation marks. The sheriff said it's possible this is where Brandon crouched to watch Kyle and the officer at his truck. So what happened to Brandon Lawson? Deputy Neal of the Coke County Sheriff's Office thinks he walked back to the highway and got a ride. Law enforcement unanimously reports that foul play was not a factor and believes a body would have been found if Brandon was still in Coke County. But how do they know he wasn't taken elsewhere and foul play was there? But the Lawsons assert that Brandon never would have left his family, and Kyle denies he was hallucinating from drugs. Many feel that the 911 call points to foul play. Others hear the recording as a sign of drug-induced mania and believed Brandon succumbed to the elements. Now, let's say it is drug-induced mania. How does that mean there wasn't also a situation with either corrupt law enforcement or criminals of some kind? I mean, again, these black and white logical fallacies are so obvious small children can understand them, and yet so many other pieces just want to desperately misapply Occam's razor when there's so many variables missing. There's no shortage of conspiracy theories claiming abduction by drug cartels or the trucker who called 911 or police cover-ups, and the list goes on and on. Because we all know that has never happened in any case ever, right? We can only hope that this case is solved someday. Until then, we can't help but wonder how a 26-year-old father of four seemingly vanished into thin air. So I will go over this article from San Angelo, which is very in-depth, by Krista Johnson. This was posted July 12, 2018, updated August 9, 2019. Every few months, Coke County's 6-person sheriff's office, that's not a big office, receives a call from someone seeking information about Brandon Lawson. Every few months, they tell someone the case is dead. That's an interesting way to put it. However, this is interesting. They only have a 6-person office. So if 1 or 2 or 3 of these individuals was involved in some law enforcement cover-up, that would be even easier to keep quiet because there's not a gigantic department. Yeah, it's very interesting. We don't have any leads, Chief Deputy Brandon Neal explains. We have nothing. How often do law enforcement admit that flat out? That is blunt. Let me say that again. We don't have any leads, Chief Deputy Brandon Neal explains. We have nothing. On Thursday, August 8th, 2013, Lawson, then 26, briefly returned to his San Angelo home after not coming home the previous night. Ledessa Lofton, Lawson's girlfriend of 10 years, mother of their 3 children, and stepmom to Lawson's eldest daughter, was infuriated by his absence because of his recent drug relapse. The two fought and he left. Lawson never returned. His last known location was along U.S. Highway 277, north of San Angelo and right before the West Texas town of Bronte, population not quite 1,000. A desolate 2-lane highway. Deputy Neal said a person could probably lie down in the middle of the road and not worry about being run over? Wait a second here. If it's that desolate, so we hear multiple things that could be gunshots, like 3, 4, or 5 gunshots, 4 or 5. And Kyle said it was cars going over the highway at 1 a.m., whereas Deputy Neal is saying that it's desolate and you could lie down in the middle of the road and not worry about being run over. And he didn't even say that in the middle of the night. He's making that statement in general. Can you do that during the day? So how could there be that many vehicles? And later on in the audio, there's 3 gunshots in relative succession. Could that be 3 vehicles if it's that desolate? I don't know. Those are things to think about. Was it gunshots or cars going over a highway, as Kyle for some reason has said? And how would he know? That's kind of weird. A red and white metal cross standing about 3 feet tall marks the spot where Brandon's pickup rolled to a stop that night. Even if you're looking for it, you might miss it among the overgrown brush and cactus that line the terrain. Is it cactus or cacti? I don't know. Some people think Lawson, because of an outstanding warrant or his rocky relationship with Lofton, purposely disappeared and is living a new life undetected. I mean, how would that explain the anomalies in the call, though, and someone in the background saying, protect yourself? Some think Lawson, because of a 911 call he made that night and the fact neither his remains nor possessions have been found, was hurt by someone. And some think Lawson, because of his drug use and the rough terrain in the area, died from the elements out there in the scrub, and search attempts just haven't found him. The night of Brandon Lawson's disappearance, according to a phone call he had with his father around 11:30 that night, Brandon was headed to his parents' house in Crowley, about 3 hours away. It was just past 12:30 a.m. when he called his brother, Kyle Lawson, who also lived in San Angelo, asking for help because he ran out of gas. 3 expletives are chasing me out of town, Brandon told his brother. When Brandon said it was the Mexicans in the neighborhood, Kyle asked if he was tripping, if it was drugs causing him to hallucinate, but Brandon denied it was all in his head. Kyle went over to Brandon and Lofton's house less than a mile away to get the gas can, then headed out of town with his wife at the time and 4-year-old son. The brothers kept making calls to one another, but Kyle said Brandon wouldn't have a full conversation with him, more or less saying a sentence or 2 before hanging up. At one point, Brandon said he was running through a field and was bleeding, which Kyle took as him tripping over some rocks or another minor accident of the sort. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon called 911, which at the time rang at the local nursing home in Robert Lee. The call is hard to understand, but many have said Brandon sounded distressed. Among a series of unclear statements, he told the dispatcher he ran out of gas, was in the middle of a field, and that he needed help, and asked, "Please hurry." When the dispatcher asked if Brandon needed an ambulance, he said, "No, I need the cops." Although that's not entirely true. You could hear him say, "Yeah," and then in a different tone, "No, I need the cops." Possibly from a different part of the conversation if the call was edited. Spotty cell phone service kept several calls to and from Brandon Lawson from connecting. Here's a look at those phone records. 12:51, Kyle called Brandon and left a voicemail. 12:51, Brandon called Lofton, but she didn't answer. After their fight and lacking a wall charger, Lofton had taken her phone to her car to charge. And another point here, if Brandon Lawson really is that tripped out on drugs, he seems to be able to operate his phone quite efficiently and make all of these quick calls to a bunch of different people. You have to navigate the phone menu to call all these different people. And if he's just calling random individuals, that's not the case. He's calling these same few individuals, so it's not just him hitting whatever on his phone. So clearly there's a certain amount of wherewithal. And you could hear that also on the call. He seems pretty lucid. He does not seem like he's completely out of it on some drug trip. And it's not difficult to make these calls that quickly. And it's difficult to make calls very, very quickly if you're completely out of it and you can barely read your screen or whatever the case may be. 12:52, Kyle's wife called Brandon, then called again. 12:54, Kyle called Brandon. 12:57, Brandon called his neighbor. 12:58, Brandon called Kyle and called again. 12:58, the neighbor called 3 times. 12:59, Kyle called Brandon. 1:04, the dispatcher at the nursing facility called Brandon back trying to get more information about his location and what was wrong. She left a voicemail and called once more. 1:09, Brandon called Kyle 3 times. 1:12, Kyle called Brandon 3 times. 1:15, Brandon called Kyle twice, the last calls he made from his phone. 1:19, all calls made to his phone begin going straight to voicemail. Deputy Neal arrived at Brandon's pickup just after 1 a.m. after dispatch received a 911 call from a trucker along US 277 that reported Brandon's F-150 obstructing traffic by being over the white line. The last gas station before Bronte is in San Angelo, a distance of about 30 miles between another, so Neal had responded to plenty of calls of people running out of gas. When he arrived at Brandon's pickup, Brandon wasn't there, but Kyle was just pulling up. "I can see you, I'm right here," Kyle said Brandon told him, although he couldn't see his brother anywhere. With an active warrant out of Johnson County for possession with intent to deliver, Kyle assumed Brandon was hiding to avoid getting in trouble with the police. So again, for all the coincidence theorists out there, this is a guy who has a warrant out for possession with intent to deliver. So what kind of individuals, what kind of circles is Brandon Lawson running with? And is it really out of the realm of possibility that other drug dealers or drug-related criminals were out to get him for whatever reason? And that may or may not include corrupt law enforcement or state troopers. "I hollered and screamed my brother's name and he never came out," Kyle Lawson said. At the time, neither Neal nor Kyle knew about the 911 call Brandon had made. Kyle told Neal the pickup belonged to Brandon and that he was walking along the road, but his phone kept losing reception, purposely leaving out the fact Brandon said he was close by. "At the time, I didn't feel he was in any danger," Kyle said. After Kyle and Neal finished talking, Kyle decided to drive away and park up the road a bit to see if his brother would come out once the deputy left. "I sat there for a good 30 to 45 minutes, Kyle said. He eventually left because his son was hungry and crying. He wasn't able to put gas in the can because his check hadn't hit his bank account yet. So he left it in the bed of the pickup thinking Brandon would be able to walk to the gas station. I go back to San Angelo, I get food for my kid and stuff. I figure, okay, he's just out there. He's hiding because of the police. He's going to be out there whenever I go back. When I take the gas, maybe the police officer will be gone by then," Kyle said. When he did get back to the pickup about 5 a.m., Brandon wasn't anywhere to be found. "I hollered and screamed my brother's name, and he never came out." Is Brandon Lawson missing on purpose? One working theory is Brandon Lawson's criminal past and rocky relationship pushed him to voluntarily disappear and start a new life. Because the pickup was over the white line and Brandon was the only one with a key, Coke County had it towed a little after 8 a.m., August 9th, 2013. The next day, according to a sheriff's report, Deputy Neal checked the homes and properties of owners who were gone because many people in the area use their land seasonally, looking to see if anything had been disturbed or for signs someone might have gotten water from them. He didn't find anything. Later that day, he checked the same area with a thermal imaging camera but didn't register a human-sized heat signature. On August 11th, Neal reported a small private search team gathered at 8 a.m. and ended their search about noon. So regarding the thermal imaging camera, now again, this is something I go over in the Delphi case. So in the Delphi case, the thermal imaging drone camera did not pick up any bodies, which leads many to believe that Liberty German and Abigail Williams were not there the day of their disappearance, and they were brought back at a later time, and they were discovered. Also because people, allegedly multiple searchers, searched the exact area where they were found, and they weren't there until the following day. Regarding the thermal imaging camera here, if Brandon Lawson, let's say, just passed out and was still alive, then the next day, his heat signature would still be there if he was still alive, or if he had died not long before, because the human body does retain heat for quite some time. So it seems like he wasn't in the area unless he went beyond the area that the thermal imaging camera searched. On August 11th, Neal reported a small private search team gathered at 8 a.m. and ended their search about noon. The only sign of anyone being in the area was a spot under a tree where it appeared someone sat down close to the roadway within eyesight of where Lawson's pickup broke down, the report states. Texas Ranger Lieutenant Dwayne Gall met with Neal and Coke County Sheriff Wayne McCutcheon about the case August 12th. Neal reported Gall came to the same conclusion as he and McCutcheon, that Lawson is possibly no longer in Coke County, but would see about making arrangements on the availability of a DPS helicopter. Lofton came to the sheriff's office to officially file a missing persons report Tuesday, August 13th. That's a lot of days later. The same day, Texas Ranger Nick Hanna, who now leads the case, came to Coke. Is that suspicious? That Lofton or Kyle did not officially file a missing persons report until August 13th. I mean, that's close to a week later. The same day, Texas Ranger Nick Hanna, who now leads the case, came to Coke County to take a helicopter ride over the area from the Colorado River south and along both sides of US 277 near where Brandon's pickup was. It was determined that Lawson was not on the ground due to the fact there was a lot of exposed bare ground, even under the short mesquite and cedar bushes, Neal wrote. His report is concluded in his opinion that Brandon Lawson is not in Coke County, lost or hiding. Interesting. The opinion is based on Kyle's revelation that Brandon was hiding in the brush near his pickup to avoid being discovered by Neal, not seeing any indication of foul play in or around the pickup, and the text messages between Brandon and Lofton detailing the severity of their fight that night. You know what's weird, though? Yes, let's say they had the most severe fight ever. If Brandon Lawson is involved with drug criminals, that fight is almost irrelevant, because if there's drug criminals out to get him, whether he fights with his girlfriend or not, if they're out to get him, they're out to get him. It's kind of weird. His belief, he reported, is that after he and Kyle left the pickup, Lawson walked back to the roadway and was able to get a ride from a passing motorist. And yet he's saying you can lay on the road and not worry about being run over. So how long did it take him to get... Not every motorist might be willing to give a random guy a ride. I don't know. Years later, Brandon's continued absence has strengthened Neal's views. When he went missing, Coke County was in the middle of a bad drought, Neal said. During a plane search, Neal said they were able to spot corn sacks from the air. If you can see those from the plane, you can see someone laying down, he said. At the time, the drought was bad. Leaves were drying up and everything, he said, adding that the river at that time was low, the deepest point just reaching his knee. If someone wants to be gone, they can, Neal said, adding Brandon had an active warrant, which could be a contributing factor for why he is gone. In addition to the warrant, those who have followed the case also point to the fact that Brandon cashed in his 401k with Renegade Oil Services just before he went missing. Several months after Brandon's disappearance, Kyle Lawson was asked to meet Ranger Hanna, Sheriff McCutcheon, and an investigator from Johnson County, where Brandon's warrant was issued, to answer questions. They asked Kyle whether he had hurt his brother or given him a ride somewhere. Kyle eventually requested a polygraph test. So Kyle was the one requesting the polygraph. I guess he got annoyed at their questions. They said I passed the one on harming and tried to say the first one was faulty because I had coughed a few times during the test, Kyle said. Wow, that's really weird though. So they were really focused on Kyle. Huh. Interesting. Another man, John Shadden, disappeared from Coke County in 2007 and has never been seen again. Neal said his disappearance was intentional too, a sentiment shared by some of Shadden's acquaintances, but a sentiment Lawson's family staunchly denies as a possibility for Brandon. And that's kind of weird too, though. Is Neal's default position is, oh, these people just ran away intentionally, that way he doesn't actually have to solve a case? Because if this is just being repeated for everybody that disappears from Cook County, oh, this is bizarre. This is bizarre. Quite mind-shocking. Was Brandon Lawson harmed? During calls before he went missing, Brandon said he was being chased and requested police during his 911 call. Some believe that as evidence, someone killed Brandon after he left his pickup. Brandon's father, Brad Lawson, goes back and forth on what he thinks happened to his son. Sometimes he tries to be realistic, saying that he accepts the chances of Brandon being alive are slim. Other times he admits to nightmares, like seeing Brandon being forced into slave labor for a cartel, one of the few situations he can think of that would mean Brandon is alive. If Brandon were intentionally harmed by someone, there are endless ways it could have occurred. The Lawson family has wondered whether someone was actually following him that night, whether he stumbled on someone's land and never left, whether his death was a crime of opportunity for someone passing. I'm so scared we're never going to find him, Lofton said. My kids are going to be having their own kids or getting married and still not know what happened to their dad or where he's at. The couple met in high school during her sophomore year, his junior. When he approached her in the hallway asking if she knew who he was, she proudly responded, "No, am I supposed to?" Even though she had seen him around. He asked her to write her phone number down on a piece of paper. "I swear there was already a number there," she chuckled, but decided to give it to him anyway. His laugh, his personality, and his pretty blue eyes caught and kept her attention for the next 10 years. Being with family was important to them, and they enjoyed doing things together like watching movies, going camping and fishing, living life to the fullest, Lofton said. "We weren't the perfect couple. We grew up together. We were babies, but we were happy. We loved each other." Their fight that night, she said, was the result of several factors. "We were stressed out," she said, explaining he was working over 60 hours a week and they had 3 kids in the house. Their youngest son only a few months old at the time. So he's working over 60 hours a week. So how much of a dysfunctional druggie could he be working that many hours? "For a long time, I blamed myself," she said. She also regrets the words spoken during their fight. "I will never get those words back." For her and their children, the 911 call contains the last words they have from Brandon. The 2 older girls listened to it on YouTube, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "It just hurts me that I can't find him for them," she said. "As a mother, you don't ever want your children to go through pain." Brad doesn't believe his son deserted his family. Something happened that night, and it wasn't him meeting a girl and driving off somewhere, Brad said. In his opinion, the warrant definitely wouldn't have been enough motivation. Brandon had already done some jail time, and Brandon wasn't afraid to take the punishment that was dealt to him, he said. "No, I don't believe that, not for a minute. It took a lot more than that to scare Brandon." Additionally, Brandon was actively making future career plans, Brad said. Brandon had a whole new job he was going to start that Monday with more money and more benefits. Okay, so the coincidence theorists brush off everything, but in any kind of case, something that is out of the ordinary really needs to be looked at. This is not just another average day. So he's in the process of cashing out his 401k and starting a new job that Monday when he goes missing. So is this work related in some capacity? People don't start a new job every single week. So this is an unusual week for Brandon Lawson in many ways. Lofton said she knows Brandon initiated the process of cashing in his 401k, but she doesn't know if he ever got the money. His last check was direct deposited into his account that Friday and was never withdrawn, eventually going to the state to cover child support for his eldest daughter, Lofton said. You know what's weird, though? They can't verify whether he got his 401k. I mean, what is this? I mean, this is a 2018 article. They can't verify whether he actually got the 401k. They can verify that his last check was direct deposited and he never withdrew it. Interesting. Brandon went up missing in the dead of night. How far could he have actually gone in that terrain, Brad asked. How far could a man have gone in a pair of shorts without any water or anything to drink? Beyond not being able to find Brandon's body, Kyle doesn't understand how all traces of his brother vanished. For a person to have a wallet, keys, and a full keychain, socks, shoes, shirt, a wallet full of cards and money, and an ID, and his cell phone, a cell phone case, all of that stuff, and not a single thing has been found out there. I just don't understand that, he said. My brother might have been a felon and might have messed with drugs, and he might have relapsed, Kyle said. But my brother worked for what he had. He loved his children. He took care of his children. He was a good person. He wasn't some dope fiend living on the streets, robbing people, or trying to get over on someone to get high again. And this seems to be corroborated. I mean, over 60 hours a week of work. Lofton believes someone knows something about what happened to Brandon, and if they could just come forward, they could make my life, my kids' life, so much better. Another point, too, he hadn't been home the previous night. So where was he the previous night and with whom? And he's starting a new job. He's cashing out his 401k. How often do these occurrences happen in someone's life? This is a strange culmination leading up to a disappearance, and any part or none of all of these factors might be a factor. We don't know, of course. But to just hallucinate that these are all coincidences and that it can definitely be known that they're a coincidence, that those are coincidences, I mean, that's silly nonsense, and that's why cases remain unsolved. She hasn't been able to find the identity of the dispatcher he spoke to that night, or who the trucker that called about the pickup was. Whoa, what the heck? So, what? So from 2013 to 2018, Lofton still, they don't know who the dispatcher was? What the heck? Okay, this is mind-shocking on so many levels. So obviously, doesn't law enforcement know who the dispatcher and who the trucker was? But 5 years later, Lofton still doesn't know, so this information hasn't been released? People should like to talk about what they think happened to Brandon. This is bizarre. I tell myself it was an accident, even though when you listen to the 911 call and you know it's not, she said. When it's your person in your life that you spend every day with, you don't want to think anyone would want to hurt him. I loved Brandon so much. He was the true love of my life. You know when you feel like you can't live without somebody, that was it. Did Brandon Lawson succumb to the West Texas element? US 277 cuts through desolate, drought-prone terrain, spotted green with thorny mesquite, husache, and cactus. It's an environment largely inhabited by rattlesnakes and feral hogs. Texas Ranger Nick Hanna could not discuss Brandon's case because it's an active investigation. Even though supposedly they have nothing and zero evidence. But Lofton said Hannah told her he thinks Brandon's body is somewhere out there in that land. In an email, Hannah did provide information on the efforts to locate Brandon in Bronte with physical searches conducted on 4 occasions in August. One in September, one in October, another in January 2014, February 2014, and the last in July 2014. These searches included 2 DPS helicopters, ATVs, Texar, 6 cadaver dogs, 4 different agencies at one time or another. Hannah wrote, "It's a tough case. People always want to blame it on law enforcement that they didn't do a good job, but they only have so many resources." Since Brandon went missing, Hannah has received leads of possible sightings, all of which have been determined not to be Mr. Lawson, he wrote. So apparently they definitively ruled out a lot of these sightings, which you don't have in other cases, where in other cases some of the sightings are vague and they may or may not have been him. But Hannah is stating here, all of which have been determined to not be Mr. Lawson. Unless, of course, he's lying and covering something up, but why would he do that? Private investigator Paula Boudreau understands the family's frustration. "It's a tough case. People always want to blame it on law enforcement that they didn't do a good job," said Boudreau, the second private investigator Lofton has hired. But she said they have only so many resources, just like me. Well, they have a lot more resources than a private eye. Coming onto the case with fresh eyes, Lofton said Boudreau is tracking down leads when they come up, usually from the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page, which has nearly 15,000 likes. You never know, a little something might become something, Lofton said about the tips. When it comes to searching the area, some landowners wouldn't allow Boudreaux or Brandon's family on their property. But Boudreaux said she has been told the rangers and sheriff have cleared that land. And of course, if there is a cover-up, if someone is associated with the sheriff or rangers, then they would, of course, have said the land was searched, even if it wasn't, if they do know something had happened on a particular piece of land. But again, we don't know whether that is true or untrue. In 4 separate searches using dogs, she was able to clear land west of US 277, south of Highway 158 to Humble Road, as well as the land east of US 277, south of Main Street to just west of Highway 285. For the private land within those quadrants where owners wouldn't allow her onto the property, her response was, "I'll just fly over your land and I'll have binoculars," she said, taking a helicopter trips over the area on 2 occasions. But Boudreaux said she hasn't been back to Bronte to clear more land for almost 2 years. "You do all that you can with what you know," she said. "Then at some point you just got to sit back and wait." Lofton is waiting to hear back from Texas EquiSearch, a nonprofit search and recovery team that uses horses to cover large areas. She plans to use drones to fly over the area as well. Finding Brandon, whatever the outcome, the Lawson family said would help. "It don't get any easier," Brad said about not knowing what happened to his son. "Each day you wonder if you're going to get that call. It's not every once in a while. All along, I've stated the fact that I would like to find Brandon and bring him home where he belongs," he continued. "The chances of us finding Brandon alive are almost none, and I understand that and I realize that, but he's not here. He deserves to be brought home to his family. For now, the red and white cross bearing Brandon's name that his grandfather made gives his family a place to visit every few months. I just want to find him to have closure on where he's at. Then we'll get to the point of what happened," Lofton said. "Finding him, no matter what, we would have somewhere to visit, not just that cross." So, very, very in-depth article here on Go San Angelo. Okay, I'm going to go over yet another article here. This is on medium.com featuring some details previously not gone over. This was posted February 17th, 2020 on the True Crime Files, medium.com. Murder, meth, or an innocent mishap, what happened to Brandon Lawson? Brandon Lawson had a lot to live for. He had been dedicated to his fiancée, Ladessa Lofton, for 10 years, and the couple had 3 children. Brandon also had a child from a previous relationship. By all accounts, Brandon was a loving and attentive father, but he had struggled with substance abuse issues in the past and had recently relapsed shortly before his disappearance in 2013. More than 6 years later, Brandon's family and those familiar with the case still wonder whether his drug issues played a role in his disappearance, and if so, what role? Into the darkness. The evening of August 9th, 2013 wasn't a very good one for Brandon Lawson. The 26-year-old San Angelo, Texas resident was an oil field worker who sometimes spent 13 hours on the job at a time. According to Ladessa, Brandon sometimes worked 95 hours a week. Wow. So this is an oil field worker working up to 95 hours a week? That's insane. So if he's a druggie, I mean, he's one of the most functional druggies ever. I mean, this guy, it's amazing. You have to be quite dedicated to your family to work 95 hours a week. The long hours precipitated a job change, and Brandon was to start his new job soon. Again, another interesting tidbit there that is a little unusual. When a very tired Brandon arrived home on August 9th, his exhaustion only grew worse when he began arguing with his fiancée. He was said to have been in panic mode. So was he upset about something else, and where was he the night before when he didn't come home? But Ladessa had a right to be angry. Her common in-law husband hadn't come home at all the previous night, and she was frustrated by his recent drug use. In a rage, Brandon left the family's home, intending to drive to his father's house in the town of Crowley, a 3.5-hour drive away. Worried about her fiancé's state of mind behind the wheel, Ladessa phoned Brandon and asked him not to go all the way to Crowley. It was already after midnight. Instead, Ladessa suggested he make the 5-mile trek to his brother's house to spend the night. Brandon switched gears and started driving north on Highway 277 towards Abilene, abandoning his journey towards his father's house along Highway 67. This doesn't necessarily mean he decided to heed Ledessa's advice, however. It's possible that Brandon chose an even longer route to his father's house. Brandon had a bench warrant, so it's possible he was still headed to his father's house, but opted to take the back roads to avoid police or to take a more scenic route. Scenic route at night? Of course, it would have made much sense to take the scenic route. Of course, it wouldn't have made much sense to take the scenic route in the middle of the night, but he wasn't in the best frame of mind at the time. Brandon's truck was almost out of gas, but he decided to try and make the 30-minute drive to Stripe's convenience store and gas station. Meanwhile, back at Brandon and Ledessa's home, Ledessa phoned Brandon's brother, Kyle, out of concern for Brandon's well-being after their argument. Kyle offered to come with his girlfriend Audrey and visit Ledessa and the children, one of whom was sick at the time. Kyle arrived at the home around 12:10 a.m. About 45 minutes after Brandon took off in his truck, he too phoned Kyle, but not for a wellness check. He needed his brother to bring him gasoline as his truck had stopped running along Highway 277 near Bronte. It was hard to make out everything Brandon was saying because cell service was spotty in the area where his truck broke down. The last thing Brandon told his brother was, "I'm 10 minutes up the road. Just hurry up and get here." At some point while he was on the phone with his brother, Brandon said, "3 expletives are chasing me out of town." The expletive referred to Mexicans, and when Brandon said this, Kyle immediately suspected that meth was contributing to his brother's state of mind and asked him if he was tripping, but Brandon assured him he was not. So just another quick aside here, if there was some kind of Mexican cartel involved here, there's a higher chance of that happening in Texas than, let's say, Minnesota. So these aren't necessarily the ramblings, the meth-induced ramblings of a psychotic man. Especially a guy with a warrant who has a history of drug use and or distribution in some capacity, or at least a warrant out for such. Kyle called Ledessa and told her to leave a gas can on the porch, which she did before taking a shower and going to bed. She also put her cell phone in her van to charge as her phone was running out of juice and she didn't have a working charger that she could use in the house. With her phone out of sight and out of mind, Ledessa missed several calls from both Kyle and Brandon. When she went to sleep that night, she expected that Brandon would be back in the morning. The plan to help Brandon was a lengthy one, not as simple as picking up the gas can and taking gasoline to the broken down truck. Kyle was still waiting for his latest paycheck to clear, so he would have to pick up the gas can, drive out to where Brandon was stranded, get money from him, go get gas, and then return to Brandon's truck. But when Kyle and Audrey arrived at the location, Brandon directed them to, he was nowhere to be found. Brandon's truck wasn't sitting alone alongside the road, however. A police car was parked next to it. It didn't appear that an accident had occurred, nor were there any signs of a struggle. A concerned motorist had seen the abandoned truck and the odd way in which it was parked and had phoned the police. Okay, so another point here, when Kyle and Audrey arrived, a police car was already there. So does that mean that this Deputy Neal, was involved in something? Were the gunshots heard? Did that have something to do with Deputy Neal? Now, here's the thing. He said state troopers, so that wouldn't be Deputy Neal. But what are the gunshots and what are these other individuals? That means there was another vehicle there at some point, and again, we have no evidence of that. So it's hard to figure this out. The frantic 911 call. When Kyle and Audrey arrived at the mile marker where Brandon told him they would be, Deputy Neal from the Coke County Sheriff's Office explained that he had been dispatched to the spot after a passing motorist had called 911. And we'll be getting to the point that apparently no police were sent based on Brandon's 911 call. So the only reason, according to his story, Deputy Neal, again, if we don't have any evidence from the dispatcher, they still can't figure out who the police dispatcher was in this small town. Well, what is going on? Shortly after Brandon hung up with his brother the last time, a terrified and frantic Brandon also called 911. The dispatcher had a difficult time deciphering a great deal of what Brandon was saying, but they were able to make out the following. Yes, I'm in the middle of a field, inaudible, pushed some guys over right here going towards Abilene on both sides. My truck ran out of gas, there's one guy here, the guy's chasing, inaudible, to the woods, please hurry. Is it possible he picked someone up, that Brandon Lawson had someone else in his truck at some point before whatever happened at that location? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Was he making some kind of drug deal? And it went wrong. And maybe or maybe not there's officers involved. He also told the dispatcher, we're not talking to him, inaudible. I told you I ran into him. That's the first guy. When the dispatcher asked Brandon if he needed an ambulance, he replied, no, I need the cops. After that, the connection went dead. And of course, when we listen to it, you can hear a second person saying, protect yourself or something of the like, and things that could be gunshots. Okay, it would be 3 days before anyone realized that Brandon had phoned 911 as no one was dispatched to his location after that. LaDessa only discovered the exchange while scrolling through Brandon's phone records. It's likely the dispatcher dismissed Brandon's pleas for help when the call was dropped. Okay, all right, now here's where we're going into Mindshock land. So there's a missing guy. Nobody even knows that he phoned 911. No police were ever dispatched to his location as a result of the 911 call. And the 911 dispatcher to this day remains unidentified. Does this sound normal to anybody? Anybody? Bueller? It's kind of weird. Many recordings of the 911 call have made the rounds online, some slowed down or enhanced in an effort to learn more. It's clear from these recordings that Brandon was desperate and out of breath. His thick southern drawl sometimes make it difficult to determine what he's saying. It's possible that his intoxicated state contributed to the garbled nature of the call. Kyle and Audrey noticed that Brandon appeared to have abandoned his truck in haste. The back end was sticking out on the road, its doors unlocked. The passing motorist had called the police because he believed the protruding truck was a hazard to other drivers. Brandon's keys, wallet, and cell phone were missing. Somewhere in the midst of the chaos and confusion that night, Brandon managed to call Audrey to tell her that he was bleeding, but once again it was impossible to glean any more details from the call because of the poor connection. Despite numerous searches of thousands of acres of land, including the use of cadaver dogs, infrared cameras, and airplanes to search from above, no one has seen or heard from Brandon since that fateful night. Another point here. Is it possible that Brandon Lawson's driving along and he stumbles upon some kind of situation? Maybe an arrest gone wrong with state troopers, maybe corrupt state troopers involved in some kind of a drug deal, and he stops the vehicle and runs off because maybe they already have their guns out, or if there's no one else in the road, he's pulling up to them. Did they block off the road for something, for some reason? And then they saw him. Was it someone looking for a victim? Was it some kind of cartel situation? Or was it some kind of gang members or criminals out to have some fun and they blocked off the road in some capacity? Or individuals impersonating state troopers? And they blocked the road in some way which forced him... But if his truck is out of gas, though, if there's zero gas in the truck, is it possible at the moment his gas is running out, this is all going down? Again, this seems to be an outlier case. So no one is arguing that in the majority of all these missing persons cases that all of these factors converge and cause the situation. Is this one of those rare cases that this happened to happen? Let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies. More than one thing could be true. And again, I'm not asserting, for the Dunning-Kruger crowd out there that keep commenting on my shock videos, I'm not asserting that this is a likely possibility or that all of these possibilities are equal likelihood. For whatever reason, the cognitive dissonant coincidence out there, they get really triggered and they hallucinate then I'm saying that all of these scenarios are equally possible. Just pretty hilarious. Theories: since Brandon's 911 call was of such poor quality, it's frustrating trying to figure out what he was saying and what, if anything, was happening to him in those moments. Yet the theories of what happened to him depend largely on that call because, frankly, that's all we have to go on. Thanks to the Crawl Space podcast, which interviewed Kyle Lawson, we now have a lot more details than we did when Brandon first went missing. Theory 1, he was murdered. A hastily abandoned vehicle, a 911 call placed by a panic-stricken man, and a disappearance spanning 6.5 years. Yup, it definitely sounds like murder. You know what they say, though, never judge a book by its cover. The theory that Brandon was murdered is supported by the following facts. Brandon indicated in the call that he was not alone. He pushed some guys over on both sides. This obviously suggests that he was in the presence of more than one person. He goes on to say in the call that one person was chasing him and another one was doing something in the field, running towards it perhaps. We may never know. And it does sound like someone is saying protect yourself in the background. Based on the 911 call, Brandon ran into these people, though it's not clear exactly what that means. Some have suggested that he physically ran into another vehicle or hit an actual person, but there was nothing found at the scene to suggest either scenario had occurred. Yet run into means encounter. It doesn't necessarily mean physically crashed into. He requested the police. He claimed he was bleeding. He mentioned to his brother Kyle that the Mexicans in the neighborhood were after him. However, no one knew who he was referring to, and his truck broke down in a desolate area, not a neighborhood. During an interview with Kyle on the Crawl Space podcast, Kyle said Brandon told him that Ledessa got the aforementioned Mexicans from the neighborhood to chase him out of town. 2 were still chasing him, but a third one had been pulled over by a state trooper. So this is what Kyle said on the Crawl Space podcast. Okay, so here's the thing, though. They got into this really bad fight. Is it possible that Ledessa got some people, possibly not even Mexicans, but again, if Brandon Lawson is in some kind of drug-induced state, or just mistaken, he might have thought they were. Who knows? But either way, that doesn't mean people weren't chasing him out of town. I mean, it's very curious. It's very curious, although I would assume that the single-digit law enforcement department would have at least talked to the neighbors to see if anything strange happened that night or the night before, and has anyone ever nailed down where Brandon was the night before? Also, another thing to keep in mind, this guy's working incredibly long hours. So whether he's also on drugs or not, if this incredibly exhausted individual also becomes embroiled in some kind of running shootout or high-stress situation after not sleeping much for an hour period of time, he's going to be out of it even if he's not on drugs, to a certain extent. So I found another interesting tidbit on morbidology.com, the bizarre disappearance of Brandon Lawson, where it states he also called Kyle's girlfriend Audrey. She was the last person to ever speak to Brandon that night. In that phone call, he pleaded, Audrey, I'm bleeding, before the call was cut off. So this is something, this was in the San Angelo Standard Times, September 28th, 2013. Family police search for a man. And this tidbit I haven't heard. Apparently she was the last one that has a conversation with her, and he's saying, I'm bleeding. Audrey, I'm bleeding. And that is, of course, ominous. If Brandon had been murdered, investigators surely would have found blood at the scene, which they did not. It's possible that Brandon was taken by someone and murdered elsewhere, but that doesn't change the fact that Brandon said he was bleeding, but no blood was ever found. Not on the road, not in the field, not in or on his truck. Let me put it this way, if blood was found, the information was never made public. Is it possible, like, he wasn't bleeding severely? So, like, let's say he has a cut on his forehead and it's just running down his face to his shirt and his shirt is absorbing everything. And somehow, even if there were drops of blood here or there, they just weren't uncovered because there wasn't a ton of blood. Is that possible? I don't know. Continuing on here with the Medium article. Now, about the second voice on the 911 call, I've listened to the call, and it does indeed sound like someone was with Brandon when he placed the call. But again, the call was of such poor quality that it's hard to say for certain whether it was a noise or just whether it was a voice or just background noise. It could have been the voice of someone who stopped to help Brandon, but if the person was just a good Samaritan, why hasn't he come forward to be identified and interviewed by the police? That's a good point. It does clearly, it clearly sounds like there's someone else there saying either protect yourself or something like that. Something that sounds like protect yourself. But it clearly sounds like a voice. It does not sound like a car. Did he owe money? Okay, at the time of his disappearance, Brandon was once again involved in drugs. His family states this as fact. He also had an outstanding felony warrant for delivering drugs, so we can say with relative ease that he was involved with some unsavory people. Did he owe money? Was he a narc? There may very well have been a motive for killing Brandon Lawson. And another point, we don't know what's relevant or not. He's leaving one job and starting another job. So is it possible it's job related? Is it possible other people at his work were also involved in drugs? All right, next theory, he ran away. Brandon had a couple of solid reasons to run away. First, there was his felony warrant, which carried a sentence of 2 to 20 years in prison. However, he was out on bond, so he was likely looking at more probation, time served, or a very short sentence. But if he was back on drugs and tested positive for a substance, drug screenings are always a condition for parole when drug charges are involved. That could have derailed his chances of merely extending his probation and may have placed him behind bars. Also, was there a scheduled drug test to start his next job? So is it possible that Brandon faked his own death abduction to escape his legal problems? Absolutely. Brandon's family has stated, however, that Brandon had already done time in state prison and was not fearful of having to go back. The thing is, his family said he was dealing with a felony charge and had an attorney. He was not trying to get out of it. He was facing it head on. Also, he would have been abandoning his fiancée and 4 children, which no one associated with Brandon believes he would have had the heart to do. If he disappeared of his own accord, it seems odd that he would take his keys, wallet, and cell phone with him. After 3 a.m. on the morning of his disappearance, neither his phone nor his credit card, debit cards were ever used again. His keys were rendered useless when his truck was finally towed. It appears that none of the missing items from his truck served him any purpose, and if he was trying to fake his own murder or abduction, it would have made much more sense to leave those things behind. On the other hand, maybe he just always kept those things on him at all times, and their absence has little to do with what happened to him. I also think it's interesting that a man who was supposedly on the run from law enforcement called 911 asking for the police. Those were the very people he would have avoided. Since there have been no signs that Brandon Lawson started a new life, the logical conclusion, if you believe he was on the run, is that he hid out somewhere and died there. Unfortunately, because of the nature of meth, very few of the details of this case make sense. Drugs. Brandon's brother Kyle has mentioned on numerous podcasts that his brother was a meth user who was high at the time of his disappearance. According to Kyle, Brandon's argument with Ledessa was about drugs. It seems that Brandon had tried to score some meth earlier in the day and was trying to talk his brother into helping him get some. Kyle also mentioned that Brandon had done meth on the night of his disappearance. Now, did he know that with 100% certainty, or did he assume that? Are we going to put blind faith in Kyle and assume he can't be mistaken under any circumstances, no matter what? Now, also, if Kyle is telling the truth, whom did they try to score meth from? That seems like it would be a very, very good question and would need to be investigated. And did he actually score the meth? And was there some kind of a situation or argument from the individuals he scored the meth from, or tried to if he didn't? Again, we cannot ignore these possibilities. It's very possible the people he was associated with, for whatever reason, might have wanted to harm him. When Kyle was summoned to Brandon and Ledessa's home after the couple argued, Ledessa told him that Brandon was flipping out and tripping. I've written about my experiences with meth addicts in the past on this blog. They can become highly paranoid and experience psychosis. Their decision-making skills are shot, so getting behind the wheel of, I'm not sure if that's the best word, so getting behind the wheel of a truck and making a confusing 911 call while high isn't as crazy as it might sound. But what about people in the background of the call saying protect yourself and possible gunshots? What about that? If it's true that Brandon was on meth when he ran out of gas, he could have been seeing people and things that weren't there. Although those things probably wouldn't be, how could they be recorded on a 911 call if they're not real, though? He could have been paranoid in general that he was being followed, which again, whether he was or he wasn't, that doesn't mean he wasn't being followed. Paranoid people can also be followed too, particularly if they're involved with unsavory individuals in the drug trade. In other words, Brandon may not have been making anything up at all. He fully believed he was being followed by Mexicans. He fully believed he was in a field flanked by people who wanted to do him harm. Maybe he was bleeding, but it wasn't because anyone attacked him. In his fearful, paranoid state, it's possible that Brandon wandered off somewhere to hide and succumbed to the elements or to a drug overdose. I mean, you'd have to believe that all the searchers, the helicopter, all of that, they were completely incompetent in that case. He could have fallen in the water. He was near the Colorado River and a bridge and drowned for all we know. Again, highly unlikely, because if that did happen, the river was extremely shallow, so his body would be very easy to find if that happened. Or Brandon was involved in a drug deal gone bad while he was high. But again, where is the evidence of a crime and where is the body? All good questions, but I can't ignore the curiosities in the phone call and the things that don't add up. Particularly, no police were even dispatched, and they can't identify the dispatcher or the truck driver who called 911. I mean, those are curiosities. You just can't, unless you're just a really hardcore coincidence theorist, you're going to want to actually investigate that if you're after the truth. Other points of interest, let's refer back to the Crawl Space podcast for a moment, since Kyle revealed some other notable facts on the show. Kyle states that when he and his girlfriend arrived at the arranged meetup spot, they saw Brandon's truck, but not Brandon, and asked him over the phone where he was. Brandon told them he was right there, but they didn't see him. Could Brandon have gotten lost? Was he in a drug-induced psychosis? Was he injured nearby, face down in the dirt, and they literally couldn't see him? Was this a ruse to fake his own death disappearance? During the call, a police vehicle approached Kyle, which caused Brandon to shout out over the phone, "One time, run." Kyle responded by telling him he hadn't done anything wrong and wasn't going to run, to which Brandon replied, "Where is your pride, mother expletive?" He then hung up on Kyle. Kyle is absolutely certain that his brother was able to see him from his vantage point because he was able to warn him that a police vehicle was approaching. Okay, wait a second. So was the vehicle there when they came there or not? Because in these accounts, there's conflicting accounts of whether or not there's a police vehicle already there responding to the truck driver's call. Here it's stating that he was warning him that a police vehicle was approaching. Or was that a second police vehicle? A lot of this is unclear. I don't know why there's so many conflicting reports here. The field in question is actually teeming with trees and brush, so it would have been relatively easy for Brandon to find a hiding spot. Kyle said he has no idea why Brandon would have instructed him to run from the cops, since Brandon is the one who called 911 in the first place. Again, if there's something weird going on with police officers, either corrupt police officers or people impersonating police officers, Brandon might be differentiating between officers. Kyle asked the cop to go down the road and look for his brother because of the shoddy cell phone service. The cop informed him that he would do so, but he had just come from that direction and there was no sign of Brandon. After Brandon disappeared, Kyle was heavily scrutinized by the police, but he passed 2 polygraph tests. He stated that he believes the police officer he spoke to that night should be subjected to a polygraph as well. And we can all agree with that, but brain fingerprint scan more so. Now, let's assume for a minute that the police were involved in Brandon's disappearance. They could have easily told everyone that no blood or signs of a struggle were found and that they never saw Brandon along the side of the road or field. Though Kyle doesn't come out and say it, one possibility is that Brandon stumbled across police officers doing something illegal, and they had to do away with Brandon to protect themselves. Another point here, if Brandon picked somebody up, either some kind of drug dealer, user, whatever, and they were together in the truck when they encountered some kind of corrupt police officers, and then they were running, and then his buddy is saying, protect yourself. because the police officers are shooting at them or chasing them down, or not police officers, or another group of people possibly associated with police officers that would cover for them for whatever reason. Also, Kyle doesn't believe LaDessa had anyone run Brandon out of town, but it does put a new spin on the case. According to Redditors, Kyle told reporters that Brandon thought that Mexicans were chasing him about 8 months before he went missing. Maybe LaDessa was sick of dealing with a drug addict. Admittedly, it is a very sad, very frustrating, very infuriating situation to deal with. The lies get old fast, especially when there are children involved. Do I believe that LaDessa actually got Mexicans to run her fiancé out of town? Nope, but it's still a theory. So let's examine this 8 months prior incident. And this is from a subreddit. Actually, let me finish this article first, and then we will go into this development with these so-called Mexicans 8 months prior. Scraper, staper, sniper. As I mentioned, Kyle believes the state trooper he encountered that night should submit to a polygraph test. This begs the question, were the cops involved in Brandon's demise? During the 911 call, Brandon refers to something that sounds like scraper or staper in between telling the dispatcher, I'm in the middle of a field, and my truck broke down. Some have suggested he may have been saying sniper, or he was trying to say state trooper and garbled his words. Kyle believes Brandon was saying state trooper. And whether this was a garbling or an intentional editing on the part of the 911 tape, we don't know. In conclusion, in the more than 6 years since Brandon Lawson went missing, family and friends have never given up on finding the young man who had so much promise, yet was still in the merciless grip of drugs. Still, much has changed over the years. Most notably, LaDessa Lofton got married in May 2019. I'm so sad that the father of her children is still out there somewhere and she's received no closure. Good for her for moving on with her life. Things can't stay in a suspended state forever. In my unprofessional opinion, Brandon was on drugs the night he disappeared. He was hallucinating and paranoid. He wandered off somewhere and either succumbed to the elements, drowned, or was fatally injured. I don't think he is still alive. He just hasn't been found yet. The story is so creepy and unnerving, though, that the possibility he was murdered will always lurk in the dark recesses of my mind until the truth finally emerges. Many people have a harsh opinion of drug users. Unless you're dealt with the substance yourself, it's hard to understand why anyone would risk everything to get high. I get it, believe me, I do. It's hard for me to understand the draw of a drug as destructive as methamphetamine. The truth is that people use drugs to cope with pain. Wherever Brandon Lawson is right now, I hope he has found healing and freedom from his demons. May the future be good to LaDessa as well as Brandon's children. And again, this is yet another individual for some reason falling for this logical fallacy, this false dichotomy. Even if he was hallucinating, paranoid, and on drugs, how does that magically eliminate him from being able to be involved in a situation where he either stumbled upon something or was actively drawn into something by other parties? It just doesn't make any logical sense how all these so-called true crime aficionados just fall for this logical fallacy. Okay, so let's move on to the subreddit Unresolved Mysteries, where there's an interesting post here by Meat and Tits. Massive update on Brandon Lawson case. I'll update this post as soon as I can find anything more on it, just to make sure it's legitimate information. I was just listening to the Crawlspace podcast, and they played a statement from Brandon's brother Kyle on the show, followed by an interview with him. Apparently, Kyle just got out of jail and prison on a drug charge, and he reached out to communicate what he knows. Here are the major points so far with new information in bold. So Kyle, like all these, like LaDessa and these other individuals involved in this case, giving their statements, are they all neutral, objective parties? Here's the thing. They're not. They're not. There's the old saying, of course, trust but verify. On Mindshock, I say distrust and verify. If we're being logical and scientific, there's no reason to put blind faith in anybody's words. Yeah, maybe what they're saying is true. Maybe it's not. The case is still unsolved. Now, that doesn't mean they're intentionally lying. They might be saying things that they believe to be true, but they're actually not true. Or they could be lying and deceptive for a host of reasons. Not because they don't want to find the truth about Brandon, but maybe because they don't want something else uncovered that they think has nothing to do with Brandon Lawson, but maybe it does. Maybe there's other individuals on the periphery who are involved in shady dealings with them, and they were responsible for what happened to Brandon Lawson, but Kyle or Ledessa, that for some reason they think they weren't, they truly believe they weren't, and they won't disclose these other bits of info. Just going through possible theories. I'm not saying that's true or likely in any way. I'm saying it's unknown. Okay, so here are the major points so far with new information in bold. Brandon's fight with Ledessa seems to have been about drugs, as Brandon was trying to get drugs earlier that day, and he asked Kyle to get some for him or help him get some. I think the drug he's referring to is meth, because later in the podcast he mentions that Brandon occasionally did meth, and he did it on the night of his disappearance. So did Kyle actually find some meth and get it to him? And were there unsavory individuals involved in the procurement of the meth that led to something? Now, again, this guy went missing this particular night, and if Kyle somehow knows more about these individuals but is afraid to say, does he know that these individuals might possibly be involved with corrupt law enforcement as well, and that's why this case hasn't been solved? Okay, either way, Brandon and Ledessa have a major argument, and he calls his brother at some point to tell him to make sure Ledessa doesn't touch any of his things while he wasn't home. Kyle told him she hadn't touched anything, and then he gave the phone to Ledessa and Brandon, and Ledessa continued arguing. Brandon's brother Kyle returns home and showers, changes clothes, but then Kyle gets a call from his mother to go back to Brandon and Ledessa's house to calm Brandon down because he was flipping out. When Kyle gets to their house, Brandon is already gone, and so he asks Ledessa what happened. She claims Brandon was tripping and flipping out. Kyle then gets a call from Brandon, and Brandon tells Kyle that Ledessa got some Mexicans from the neighborhood to chase Brandon out of town, and there are two of them still chasing him, but a state trooper pulled over the third one. Bizarre. And like I said, there seems to be another missing piece. Did Brandon also happen to pick somebody up, either a dealer, fellow drug user, whatever, and that's the person saying protect yourself? Or if we're going down every single possible theory, is it possible that these individuals went to chase Brandon Lawson out of town, but the state troopers got on their tail and they're shooting at them, and now these so-called Mexicans, whether they're Mexicans or not, now they're basically common allies with Brandon Lawson at that moment if the state troopers are coming after all of them, in which case they're saying to Brandon, protect yourself. Or it's whoever Brandon, if Brandon picked somebody up and had somebody there with him who's his friend in the moment, is saying protect yourself from the Mexicans, and are there also state troopers following them? Again, it's hard to make heads or tails with all of this information. Brandon hangs up with Kyle, calls him back a few minutes later to tell him that he ran out of gas, asks Kyle to bring him some gas. Kyle lets him know he'll have to stop back at their house to get the gas cans. Brandon calls back several times but cannot be understood except for the call where he tells Kyle and Kyle's partner to hurry and that he's bleeding. Kyle and his girlfriend arrive to where Brandon told them to meet, and they see Brandon's truck and ask him where he is, but he claims he's right there, though they cannot see him. A vehicle approaches, and Brandon says to Kyle one more time, run. I'm 99% sure that the term one time is used to refer to cops. Kyle confirms this later in the conversation. So yeah, there's a conflicting information on whether or not the officer was there when Kyle got there or not. That definitely needs to be cleared up. Kyle tells him he's done nothing wrong, he's not going to run. Brandon says to him, where's your pride, mother expletive, and then he hangs up on Kyle. Kyle approaches the officer and asks if he can search down the road for Brandon because he keeps losing signal and he can't find him. The officer says it's okay, but tells him he's not in the direction Kyle is going because the cop just came from there and didn't see him. It's at this point that Kyle learns that Brandon called 911 in between the time that he called Kyle to ask for gas and the where's your pride call in which Brandon tells Kyle to run. Kyle states that he does not know why Brandon would say that, considering Brandon himself called the cops. After searching up and down the road, Kyle's son was hungry. I guess his son was in the car with him, so Kyle goes to his bank to withdraw some money and get some food for his son and to fill up a gas can with 5 gallons of gas. Kyle then picks up a friend to help him look for Brandon, and they return to Brandon's truck and fill it up with gas. Kyle yells, "There's no cops anymore, and we filled your car with gas. You can come out now." They go up and down the road yelling for him, but they cannot find him, and so they eventually go back home. At 9 a.m., Ledessa files a missing persons report. So according to this statement, she filed the missing persons report that day at 9 a.m. There's a lot of conflicting information in this case. It does not pass the sniff test on the part of law enforcement. Here's the thing, though. Okay, is the reason the dispatcher is never identified because the dispatcher, he gets the call from Lawson, he calls a trooper or officer in the area, they inform him that they're already on top of the situation, if they're involved in the situation. And that's why this happened the way that it happened, and there's so much confusion. At the end of the statement, the conversation starts, some interesting notes. When asked about drugs, Kyle's brother states, "I don't believe he was on meth. I know he was." So does that mean he went with Brandon and got him the meth and saw him use it? Kyle states that he himself has used meth but has never hallucinated because of it. He also says that Brandon had OD'd before, and that while meth would cause him to act differently, he has never acted like he did on the night of the disappearance. Okay, so we're talking about somebody who's been in the presence of Brandon Lawson when on drugs or on meth, and that this particular night was completely different. So he still believes he was on drugs, but apparently something else was also going on. Again, perfectly logical. Kyle says, "I don't believe Ledessa had anybody chasing Brandon out of town." Kyle says that it sounded as if Brandon was initially running, but later it sounds as if he's standing completely still. Brandon tells Kyle that he could see Kyle and the cop, though Kyle says that he could not see Brandon anywhere. In explaining how he knows 100% that Brandon was in the area, he says that noises that sounded like gunshots in the call were actually sounds of a vehicle going over the bridge over the Colorado River nearby. So there's multiple gunshots, and again, according to the deputy, the place is desolate. How many cars are going over the bridge at 1 a.m. in rapid succession? I don't know. People from the area, feel free to chime in. Kyle says that though the police doubted him, he passed 2 polygraph exams. Kyle suggested that the police officer he spoke to that night should be subjected to a polygraph test. And shouldn't that be standard? All responding officers it should be part of protocol for them to take a brain fingerprint scan or at least a polygraph. I mean, it's called accountability. I mean, isn't that just like having a body cam on them? It's for their protection, so people don't start thinking they're responsible for crimes. It's just they're a public servant. They're subject to scrutiny. They're not a private citizen. They're not entitled to privacy. They're in the middle of doing a public job paid for by the public. There needs to be accountability there. Okay, continuing on here, drug-induced psychosis seems like a real possibility now. And again, whether it is or it isn't, that doesn't mean that Brandon Lawson couldn't have been involved in some kind of situation. Apologize for this unorganized mess. This post is very incomplete and jumbled up right now, but here is a link to the Crawl Space podcast. I need sleep, but I was too excited since this case has been so mysterious up until now. Hearing Brandon's brother, Kyle, speak, I cannot say for sure whether or not he was reliable, but what he is saying does quite fit with the details available right now. Out of everything I've heard so far, I am slightly doubtful that Ledessa actually had Mexicans chase Brandon out of the city. Kyle does not believe that Ledessa had anything to do with it, since that seems like something right out of a movie plot. But if it is not true, it'd be important to know whether Brandon made it up or believed it in confused, drug-induced state, or whether Kyle made it up. Edit, though I was staunchly in the foul play camp, after listening to the podcast in its entirety, I am much, much more inclined to believe that his death was due to drug-induced psychosis. And here we have, yet again, another individual who doesn't understand logical fallacies. Just because someone is in a drug-induced psychosis, it doesn't make them magically protected by all the nefarious people out in the world, specifically if they routinely interact with these nefarious or shady individuals dealing drugs or involved in these criminal elements. It doesn't, drug-induced psychosis does not offer magical immunity from all foul play in the universe. I don't know why people just are so silly they don't understand that. But continuing on here, some observations. Thinking back on it now, after reading some replies, I too find it strange that this version of the story took so long to become public. I know Kyle was incarcerated, but that wouldn't prevent him from speaking to people about the case. Even if Kyle just couldn't reach out to anyone while locked up, why didn't Ledessa say anything? Maybe it was to keep Brandon's image clean. She was worried that the kids would one day think, what the kids would one day think. It seems a little odd to me that it took so long. I'm curious to know if the cops knew all these details too. Why did Brandon suddenly stop talking to the 911 operator? Even assuming he was in a psychotic state, there is no big commotion heard over the phone when Brandon stops talking. Only those gunshot noises, which we now know are possibly the noises of a car going over the bridge. So could Brandon hear the call fine, but was just deciding to remain quiet? Or if he's being chased by gun-toting maniacs and they're closing in on him, he might not want to speak to give away his location. I don't know. Edit. So it seems that Kyle did tell reporters that Brandon thought Mexicans were chasing him about 8 months ago, and Endless Strains points out that a poster claiming to be Ledessa also said Mexicans were chasing him. Here's a link to the post 8 months ago. If Brandon was indeed hiding out so close nearby that he could see Kyle, how far could he have possibly traveled from that time? I think a new search should be done with a specific focus on the river. See, the thing I keep coming back to is the other voice on the phone call saying, protect yourself.
You ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
You ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy. That's the first guy. That's the first guy.
I mean, that's for me, that's a sticking point. I don't know what to make of that. The gunshots might not be gunshots, sure, but what protect yourself, then gunshots, and constant references to bleeding? What does that all mean? Then you add in all these coincidences and anomalies with the dispatcher not being identified, the truck driver calling 911 not being identified, the officer on scene, inconsistent stories on when the officer actually was on scene, the fact that nobody was even dispatched to help Brandon Lawson, who's making a phone call talking about bleeding and needing police, and then the dispatcher just doesn't say anything, or does he? And does he inform officers in the area who already know what's going on because they're involved in it? Yeah, this is a tough one. This is a really, really tough case. So a couple of issues here. There seem to be more issues with the sheriff. So apparently the sheriff wouldn't allow searches on private property even though the owners gave permission of a certain property. That makes it look kind of shady. So apparently Brandon's family got permission from property owners to search a property, and the sheriff blocked them from doing so. Now, if that's true, I mean, that's really, really damning. Because they have permission and the sheriff prevented them from searching a property even with permission. I don't know exactly what got lost in translation there, or maybe the sheriff didn't want an official law enforcement search. As if he knew something was on the property. I don't know. That's really bizarre. The other thing is, of course, we don't really know what those last conversations were like or what was really discussed. Some people also even theorize this was some kind of setup for Kyle. So was Brandon Lawson being forced to call? Was someone there forcing him to call his brother to get him to come there or something? And then were they planning to do something to Kyle, but then they couldn't because the other officer was there? This is if Brandon is not alone. And if this is all true, where are the other vehicles involved? Unless Brandon picked up more than one person, is it possible Brandon picked up two people after leaving his and Ledessa's house? Did he pick up one individual or more than one individual? Were they trying to get him to get Kyle there for some reason? It's all very, very bizarre. So I'll be doing a follow-up episode with some experts who've taken apart the audio even further, and cleaned it up even further. And theory is, of course, that the 911 call that has been released is not the entirety of the call. And there's some smoking gun evidence that was deleted from the call, and more evidence that the call has been manipulated in some capacity. So, yeah, very, very mysterious case. You could definitely see why it's captivated a lot of individuals online and has received a lot of attention, and why it's been one of the most requested cases on Mindshock. So, we have gone down these rabbit holes, and we have begun investigating the Brandon Lawson case, and there's plenty more to go over in the case. And just these critical questions that have not been answered and swept under the rug that you don't see in other cases. We have to use controls here. In other cases, you don't have these ghost dispatchers and ghost callers and manipulated phone calls and voices clearly heard on the phone call, and then still pretend the individual was alone no matter what, and anybody questioning that is a crazy conspiracy theorist, aka critical thinker. Just really bizarre case. So feel free to leave your thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind in the comment section. If you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal and help support the channel for us to release even more mind-shocking episodes and examinations in a multitude of true crime cases and series that we already cover. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. You could also just go to youtube.com/Mindshock or youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime. Like and share the podcast on social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time. If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description. Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You are listening to the Brandon Lawson series. This is episode 2, Dissecting the Call. The infamous call to the police by Brandon Lawson. And of course, this is a call for which supposedly no one was dispatched to. So this is an emergency. The guy's bleeding. He says he needs the cops. And we have an unknown police dispatcher, as of yet identified and unknown, who answered this call. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Supposedly, another individual, a trucker, also called 911 regarding Brandon's truck, which was parked sticking out onto the road in an unsafe fashion, and supposedly that is the call to which police actually responded to. And it's all very suspicious, but we'll be taking a look and dissecting every aspect of this call, which we do have. And is that surprising that the 911 call has actually been released? I mean, we have other cases, like the Maura Murray case and other cases, where they have never actually released the audio from the 911 call for whatever reasons. So, is that suspicious in and of itself that we actually do have a call now? The call that might have been doctored and edited, of course. I mean, the most famous part with the state troopers. And other aspects of the call may have also been doctored because his tonality changes quite drastically. Some people say that's because he's on drugs, but could it also be that whether he's on drugs or not, could it also be that the call is doctored? And we'll be examining all of these issues and more. If you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support the channel. Help us get more mind-shocking content out there for everyone to listen to, and keep awareness up in cold cases, unsolved cases, missing persons cases, and cases allegedly solved, but that might not actually have gotten the guilty perpetrators, and wrongful convictions as well. Plenty of cases to go over. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, make sure you allow a device to have those notifications come through, or you could just go to youtube.com/Mindshock. You could also go to youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime, which will be focused only on true crime. Mindshock, of course, covers a slew of topics in a typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront in a way nobody else covers topics. Hit the like button, share the podcast across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Alright, so let's start off with the audio again. Let's listen to it again and see what we can glean from it.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just pushing guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. You got to take the to the woods. Quick burn. And when I talking to him, I show you an easy home. That's the first guy.
You need an ambulance?
Yeah. No, I need the cops.
Now, there's a couple interesting things here, which we'll dissect. Supposedly the word detective or detectives that I actually didn't hear before. But one step at a time, let's go over this post by Dysentery Gary, posted 3 years ago on Reddit, Unsolved Mysteries subreddit. Excellent subreddit. I spent 10 hours picking the 911 call apart. He doesn't say Staper, and he wasn't alone. This is my first write-up. I've been meaning to listen to the Brandon Lawson 911 audio for a while, and I just happened to be recovering from a minor surgery this week, so I dove into the rabbit hole. I have a background in audio recording and have some pretty great software speakers and headphones to listen with, and I've spent over 10 hours listening to every syllable and word in this 38-second phone call. I believe I have it as accurately transcribed as possible. I am also 99% certain this is not the entire phone call. I'll write the entire transcription and then I'll break down each piece. Operator, 911 emergency. Brandon says, yes, I'm in the middle of the field. We're safe. We're just pushing guys over. We're out here going towards Abilene on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. A guy to the woods. Please hurry. And again, just from the outlook, just from looking at that transcription, it really does seem like this was cut and pasted from different parts of a phone call. Almost as if intentionally designed to deceive, possibly? I don't know. Operator says, okay, now run that by me one more time. Brandon, partially talking over the operator, they will not talk things over. I accidentally ran into him. Operator, oh, you ran into him, okay. Unknown voice, detective, Brandon says, shot the first guy. Now, I actually think it might be Brandon saying detective shot the first guy. Let's listen to it again.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just pushing guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. You got to take it to the woods. Quick burn.
Okay, now run that by me.
And when I talked to him, I showed you an easy home.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Actually, this guy might be right. The detective is in a different volume, almost like it's farther from the phone. So it does seem like someone else said detective, and then Brandon says shot the first guy. Coincidentally, there's something that sounds like a gunshot right after that. So what are the chances statistically that a car is going over the bridge on the road that allegedly you don't need to worry about laying down in the middle of the day? So now this is closer to 1 a.m., the middle of the night, whenever. What are the chances that a car goes by on this desolate road in the middle of the night at the exact moment where Brandon Lawson says, shot the first guy? Again, this is one for the coincidence theorists that maintain that not one, not two, not three, possibly four sounds are all cars going over the bridge. They're not gunshots. Even though there's a guy calling 911 at the moment, talking about bleeding, talking about guys being chased into the woods, talking about somebody being shot. Let's listen to it again.
You need an ambulance? Ah, you ran into him. Okay. That's the first guy. Do you need an ambulance?
No, I need to call.
Okay. Is anybody hurt?
Dude, I take it to the woods. 300.
Okay, now run that by me.
And when I talk to him, I tell you I need him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
No, I need to call.
Okay.
So in the previous episode, it sounded like detective was actually protect yourself. Is it protect yourself or detective? Because this audio expert who spent 10 hours on this is saying it's detective. Now, since he mentioned that, it kind of does sound like detective. Let's listen to it again.
Is anybody hurt?
That's the first guy.
Okay.
That's the first guy.
Okay.
That's the first guy.
Okay.
That's the first guy.
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell whether it's detective or protect yourself. Either or seems to make sense contextually if there's some kind of officer there. I really can't tell. Since he mentioned detective, it actually kind of sounds like detective a little bit more than protect yourself. Again, it seems farther from the phone, so that's also one of the reasons it's hard to tell. But let's continue here. After Brandon says, shot the first guy, there's a gunshot. Operator asks, do you need an ambulance? Brandon says, yeah, no, I need the cops. Operator says, okay, is anybody hurt? Brandon whispers, crap. And then the operator says, hello, hello, hello. So I don't know if I can hear the crap after he says I need the cops, but let's try to hear it.
You need an ambulance?
Yeah. No, I need the cops.
Yeah, I can't hear it. Let's hear his explanation here. Okay, first, I'd like to clarify that it took some serious EQ and compression to hear some of these things. I didn't just listen to the YouTube vid a bunch. In many cases, I had to break down every single word. In an attempt to save time, I'm going to give my reasoning all at once to believe that A, this is what he said, B, Brandon Lawson was not alone, C, this is not the entire phone call. The opening sequence was one of the first flags for me that this is not the entire call because it just does not make sense unless there is more context to his first line. I believe what we hear Brandon first say was actually further into the conversation with the operator. His first word is yes, which is a pretty weird way to start a conversation explaining your life is in danger. Instead, I think he already told the operator the name of the road they were on and is answering a question like, can you explain where you are right now? Because Brandon's first response is yes, I'm in the middle of the field. I spent a considerable amount of time figuring out if he said the or and I firmly believe he said the. This is important because I think it shows they had already established something about a field, and now he can refer to it as the field. The second part of the sentence has made me question writing this entire write-up because I'm sure I'm going to get some huge pushback on my translation of the mysterious Staper line. Stater Staper line. I have not seen anyone else interpret it this way, but I am very confident he says, we're safe, we're just pushing guys over. What do you mean? What does it mean, you ask? I have no idea, but it's the first where until the next line. We're out here going towards Abilene on both sides. Most people hear this, and I can confirm there is a TH at the end of both, and that there is an S at the beginning of sides. I think he's saying that the two of them are on both sides of the road going the same direction. We're out here going towards Abilene on both sides. That's actually interesting. So if it's him and another individual, they're walking on the sides of the road. Each are walking on a different side of the road. Would that make sense? That's interesting. That would make sense. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. That part is easy to tell, but the next is very odd. A guy cha-cha to the woods. This part really stands out to me because when imported into an audio suite where you can see the sound, the audio fades off immediately and unnaturally after the cha sounds like che, and then there is a g sound followed by de, like Tour de France, and then a ch or sh sound. Put it all together, it sounds like che ga sh. My immediate thought when I got to the waveform of the che sound was that it looks and sounds like what happens when you fade out a sound very quickly in the audio world. The che ga de sh sound is immediately followed by almost perfect silence as far as this recording goes. I wanted to say it's proof that the part of the audio was edited, but it may have also been caused by the phone signal quickly dropping out. I don't know for sure. And you know what would be interesting if people actually went out into the general area and see if you get a really good signal at various distances from the road in that area. Because obviously in 2013 it might not have been as strong, but it would just be interesting because if it's still dropping to this day and it's not perfect, then we can add that as a very possible variable. Or if it's absolutely perfect, it could still have been an issue because in 2013, but at least it's more ambiguous, whereas we can definitely keep it on the table if the service is spotty even to this day. To the woods, this part is pretty clear to everyone. This phrase stands out to me because he delivers it much more laid back than any of his previous rapid words. He also holds out the S on the woods, giving it a fairly relaxed feel that is immediately followed by, please hurry. Easy to hear and pretty self-explanatory. And that's another thing that doesn't quite make sense, where, again, his tonality changes throughout the call as if these are different areas of the call, and depending on what's going on in the background. So did he initially call calmly, and then people are getting chased and or shot, and then he's not calm? And again, whether he is or isn't on drugs, again, a lot of these things could occur either way. Operator, okay, now run that by me one more time, and then Brandon starts speaking at the same time. It took some pretty intense EQing and listening, but I fairly clear him say they will not talk things over. Then I accidentally ran into him. Let's listen to that again.
I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just cruising guys over. Right here going towards Abilene on both sides. Not truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. You got to take it to the woods. 330.
Okay, now run that by me.
We're not talking to him. I told you ready to him.
Okay, I couldn't hear they will not talk things over, but I heard something, talk something. So I can clearly hear the talk. So it's kind of hard to tell who he's talking to. Is Brandon talking to another party there? So there's two parties in conflict in this area. One party is either chasing and or shooting, whether that's state troopers or law enforcement, who knows. And then another party is another group of individuals who will not talk things over. I don't know, quite bizarre. Let's continue here. Then Brandon says, I accidentally ran into him. This one you'll have to take my word for until I can post some EQ'd clips, because on the audio online, it clearly sounds like totally, but when it's all cleaned up, it's accidentally. He slurs the I and the axe followed by tally. And again, we also have to factor in how many hours of sleep is Brandon running on. Because if he normally is working 90-plus hour weeks, and then he's also doing meth occasionally that he has to go procure, and he's having fights with LaDessa, I mean, this is a stressed out, overworked man that might not be getting any sleep at all. And the brain does funny things when you don't have a lot of sleep, in terms of even speech patterns and such. And if they also edited the call, I mean, we're in a big mess here, because it's kind of hard to figure all this out with all these variables. Operator says, you ran into him. Okay, not much to add to this. Now is when the weird-ass phone call gets even weirder. There is a third voice on the recording that is really quiet, but you can hear a male say, detective, followed by Brandon saying, shot the first guy. The voice saying detective could have been picked up on the 911 side of the call, and it sounds like it was being used in a sentence. Hard to tell. I did put a lot of time into making sure Brandon, in fact, says shot and not got. So that's an interesting theory. So if it's detective and not protect yourself, because detective would make more sense coming up on the 911 side of the phone call, but this is a small town area. There's 6 people in the department, whatever it was. I went over that in the first episode. Is it possible that there's some kind of interplay with the phone signals? I mean, this is 2013. You would think no, but maybe. But there's so much other stuff going on in the phone call. It seems like there's other individuals there, regardless of whether that was picked up on the 911 side or not. If the audio is protect yourself, I guess theoretically that could still be on the 911 operator side. Here's the thing. Is the 911 operator, supposedly this is at some non-police facility? So is there more? They wouldn't have more than one dispatcher, would they? Like, we don't even have this dispatcher identified, but they're out of some kind of nursing home or some kind, I forgot what it was, where the dispatcher is performing their duty. So if there's nobody else there, who would be saying detective? Because this is not the police station. So this isn't an overheard people in the background on the 911 operator side saying detective. And the operator, don't they have like a fairly decent headset to prevent any kind of problems? Like all these other 911 calls I've heard, I don't know if I can recall a single one where there's some kind of pickup on the operator side. And again, people who have spent much time listening to various 911 calls, you can chime in here. All right, let's continue here. Then the gunshot. I had read people saying they heard a gunshot, and I was very skeptical. But there is almost definitely a gunshot right before the operator says, do you need an ambulance? I'm a pretty avid gun owner, and the sound is extremely similar to a shotgun or rifle. The one thing I will say, it could also be the hood of a truck slamming. I definitely lean towards a gunshot, though, because you can hear the sound reverberate for a long time, and it would have to be a very loud hood. Interesting. One thing I find extremely odd about the gunshot is that Brandon doesn't seem to react to it at all. I think I can hear 2 other gunshots in the recording, but this one is definitely the loudest and the closest. Now for a really weird part that I haven't seen much about. When the operator says, do you need an ambulance, there is another voice saying something at the exact same time. It sounds like a low, gravely African-American male voice to me. I spent a huge amount of time on that damn line, but I have no idea what he says. I believe it's 4 words, though. Brandon's response is the reason I am certain there was someone else there. Yeah, no, I need the cops. The yeah is said in a laughing manner to the person that he is there with. It is difficult to hear the laugh part, but it is there. Whatever the person said must have provided some comic relief for the split second Brandon responded to him, and then immediately responded to the operator with, no, I need the cops. Operator, okay, is anybody hurt? This last part is something I have not seen online that I'm aware of, but right before the operator says hello for the first time, you can hear Brandon whisper, crap. You can hear the sound of a vehicle coming from the distance and getting very close, right as he whispers, crap. You can hear him breathing into the phone for a bit, and the operator says hello 2 more times, and the audio just ends. Not like it was hung up, it just ends. Someone clearly found Brandon that he didn't want to see, and he stayed on the phone. There's no way the phone call ended like this, and I think whatever was heard next was probably held back for the sake of the family. I'm sorry this write-up is so long, and I have a lot more to say about the case, but I'll leave it at this for now. Thanks for reading. Let me know what you think. Yeah, let's try to hear the crap again. And I don't hear the car coming up either, but that would explain why he suddenly stops talking if he's discovered on the call by yet another party, not the immediate party he's there with.
Oh, you ran into him. Okay. That's the first That's the first Do you need an ambulance? No, I need the call. Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? 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 Hurt. Hello? Hello? Is anybody hurt? Hello?
I don't hear the crap. It kind of sounds, I could just hear what is either a gunshot or a car going over the bridge or some kind of sound off in the distance. I don't hear the crap. Then again, I don't have the most expensive headphones, so perhaps other people can hear that. But anyway, the comments here, people are saying, of course, a guy chased us into the woods and chased to the woods. So is it chased us? Again, would that provide the clue that he's not alone? And was that removed for a reason? Other people postulate, he says, one guy here taken into the woods. After possibly saying, we just screwed some guys over, they will not talk things over, I accidentally ran into him. And then a gunshot shot the first guy. So they either got mixed up with some bad people or had the worst luck ever and got into an accident with some bad people. That's interesting. Now, is that related to procuring drugs or not? Did Brandon pick someone up on his way there? We'll be looking at a couple different theories, but I just thought of something else too. Let's say there is, what's this third party? So whether or not Brandon picked somebody up, let's say maybe he did, maybe one person, maybe two people, they either got into a car accident or screwed some guys over. If, again, the audio is, who knows? Would he tell that to the police? I don't know. Again, maybe if he's on drugs, maybe he would. But where is all this happening? If this is happening in a particular plot of land with a landowner that does not appreciate people that he thinks are either involved in some kind of drug deal, or possibly one of those groups has guns, did the landowner chase them? Did a landowner not appreciate what was going on his land? Do the police know about it? Is the landowner affiliated with the police in some capacity, and he told them what happened? The police might not care necessarily, because if they're going to protect the landowner and they think he just shot a bunch of drug dealers anyway, they might not care, right? I don't know. Are state troopers involved? So it may or may not involve corrupt law enforcement. But it's really interesting because it's very difficult to know for certain what was said in the call, particularly if it was edited after the fact with parts deleted, out of order, and we'll get into another mind-shocking theory in a moment. Some people postulate instead of Staper pulled some guys over, we're safe, we're just pushing guys over, or fact, we just screwed some guys over, or think we just screwed some guys over. Also, couldn't tell whether he said totally or accidentally ran into him, or whether they shot the first guy or got the first guy. Another comment here, to me, from listening to the slowed down SoundCloud files, it sounds like we're safe, we just screwed some guys over. Still doesn't make sense, but makes more sense to me than pushing guys over. I listened to the recording several times, and the U sounds a lot more like the EU in screwed than the U in pushing. Screwed, pushing, screwed, pushing. At least to me. Also, I'm definitely hearing an R sound between the consonant, which is hard to make out, but it sounds more like an SC sound rather than a P sound, and the vowel. Even the cadence fits better with screwed some guys over. If it's pushing, then he extended the first syllable of the word in a weird way. Someone else states, no, I definitely hear a P in the beginning of the word. I hear it's like we're perching guys over. Perching. Another commenter, I definitely agree that the word he begins with is something close to a P. Either a bilabial or a labiodental. Labiodental. P and B are bilabial, i.e. made with both lips, while F and V are labiodental, meaning both lips and teeth. I also agree that the final sound is an ED, a very soft E sound, which in and of itself excludes the word pushed. Because if you pay attention to the sound of the word and not the spelling, you will hear that you actually say pushed, P-U-S-H-T, as is verified by the Wiktionary pronunciation. The middle sounds, however, are much less clear. There is definitely an R sound in the nucleus of the word. This is a very technical analysis by this individual here. The big issue is the sound that the original poster marks as SH marks as W and you mark CH. The audio is too muddy to make it out clearly. I would almost be interested in hearing the original poster's equalization, but I question the value of it since the one thing I am fairly certain of is that there is no SH sound in there. What it actually is, however, is a mystery to me. The problems are numerous. The central issue is that the speaker is obviously agitated, and that is affecting his speech production. To add to the problem, the W sound along with the Y are the only two sounds in English that are glides. They are made with motion instead of holding the lips, jaw, and tongue in a fixed position. This means that the part of what I hear as a W could easily be just an effect of his agitation. The CH sound, on the other hand, is a voiceless alveopalatal affricate, or a voiceless post-alveolar affricate, which essentially that the tongue is pressed fairly close to where its natural resting position in the mouth is. This again increases the likelihood of it being a mispronunciation due to agitation, perhaps in the place of S, D, or J. Plus, there is a burst of static sound exactly when it is enunciated that further confuses things. All this is to say I'm not totally sure what he says. Someone with a formal background in linguistics might be able to provide more insight. Everything I know about the field comes from research for a language I am making in the novel I am working on, but I am at the limits of my knowledge. A response here, to clarify, being a southerner myself, I think he says, think we just screwed some guys over. Think we just screwed some guys over. I believe he pronounces his S like an SH in some instances. Some people do, especially Southerners in my experience. That's what I'm hearing, and that would explain why I hear a W where others hear a CH or SH sound. The sh sound is there, but it's part of the next word. We Southerners tend to not enunciate, and we run our words together. Like Jeff Foxworthy's "Jeet yet? Did you eat yet? Jeet yet." One might hear a J sound, but the speaker is running a D and a Y, so it only resembles a J sound. I know someone else posted, I know some Southerners who add R sounds to certain words, like wash becomes washed. Maybe this explains it. So you're saying you have no clue what he is saying. I think the biggest cause of confusion is poor audio quality and the fact he is agitated, which amplifies his thick West Texas accent. Not sure if you've spent much time around these parts, but I doubt a linguistics expert could provide much more insight than the original poster or someone with a background in audio engineering. Regional accent and dialect play a major role in this call. The response here, yeah, I think I can rule a couple of the suggestions out, particularly pushed, but I can't give a definite answer as to what he is saying. What a linguistic expert might know is how being agitated specifically affects speech production. Is there a tendency to use a vowel sound closer to the center or further out, and what the tongue specifically does in slurring consonants? I agree that the audio quality is a bigger factor, but even regarding the accent, I think someone who had an understanding of linguistics could probably be of some help, since most of us can normally understand these accents when spoken by someone who is calm. And that's a good point. If we had a team of, let's say, a couple of audio engineers, a couple of regional dialect experts, and linguistics experts, and maybe even a couple psychologists throw in there, this whole team could probably get a little bit more out of the phone call. But I think this analysis here and this discussion here is pretty good as well. Another interesting response here by Mr. Real Human. There are instances where criminals will befriend an unknowing accomplice, like, yo, you want to make some money, come with me. You're thinking manual labor, maybe a drug deal if you're a user, and your dealer is asking a favor. Then you turn into an unwitting accomplice of murder, or far more likely here, robbery. That would explain screwing people over and the second voice. Personally, I think pretty much every theory posted, especially the one I just made up, are all horse expletive. This sounds like a mental breakdown. Someone suggested CO2, and my immediate reaction was to make fun since people love the CO2 thing after that one Reddit post. But the more I think about it, I think that may very well be the case. If it was CO2, perhaps he ran into the wrong person. Perhaps he was delusional and saw two people on the side of the road and made a scene. Maybe he got his clarity back and fled after a potential threat, his CO2 leaking truck, only to run out of gas shortly after because he was too whacked out on CO2 to consider. He calls the police, and minutes later his buddies from earlier have pulled up next to him. Car door slams, aka the gunshot, followed by the realization he is expletive. Crap. Could he have even just began as a fight? Maybe if Brandon had CO2 poisoning or whatever, said or did something to offend them, they find him intending to beat his ass, but they accidentally kill him, or he just wanted to get the expletive out of his life and faked it all. And wow, interesting. Someone responded, just no. And Mr. Real Human responded, wow, you should be a lawyer. Do they have a law firm made up of people with brain damage? If so, you would fit right in. Okay, anyway, so, okay, but his initial theory, which even Mr. Real Human himself thought was horse expletive, that's actually not too bad, but perhaps it wasn't a stranger. If it was some kind of dealer or someone he wanted to score drugs with, how far would he go to get some meth? Would they try to screw some guys over or rob some guys? And how would that end up? So let's get to some more mind shocks here. Some more comments from Reddit. Some random questions I have for people more versed in the case. I like to ask preliminary questions in a case in hopes of generating new ideas. I am not in any way insisting that I know anything about this case. I am just throwing out ideas to people who have been following the case for years and possibly generating a new idea with them. I am not an inside-the-box kind of guy, and feel free to chop my ideas down in a constructive manner or in a manner that I learn something new about the case. Here are a few of my initial thoughts reading into this case for about 8 hours. There was a trucker that called 911. Can we confirm he called? I know that Channel 9 on a CB radio allows you to call in emergencies to whoever is listening on Channel 9, and they will call the police for you. It was a lot more common before cell phones. If the trucker did call 911, did anyone file for the FOIA on those records? Anything from those records might produce a new clue. In my humble opinion, you can eliminate anything that the dispatcher is saying on the 911 call. It is my suspicion that Brandon is talking to her as if she knows what is happening. This is why I think that I'm in the middle of a field, Staper just pulled some guys over, takes a breath, it seems to me in the middle of a thought. The reason I think this is because I breathe wrong when I talk, having to take a breath in the middle of a thought. He is doing this because he is in a panic state. Right here, going towards Abilene on both sides, again, saying this as if the dispatcher knows what he is talking about, as if she knows that 2 state police cars have someone pulled over on both sides of the car. Breathes in again. My truck ran out of gas. You got 1 car here talking about a police car. Actually, if that word is "you got 1 car here," let's try to listen to that. Let's listen to that again.
Hurt. My truck ran out of gas. There's 1 car here. You got to take it to the woods.
Yeah, it's hard to tell whether it says "you got 1 car here" or 1 car here. There's 1 car here. If he said "you got 1 car here" and he's calling the police, again, it's hard to discern whether that's a "you got 1 car here" or there's 1 car here. If he says "you got 1 car here," then that's interesting, because then we know for sure he's talking about a police car, and it might be state troopers pulled some guys over. Or even still, let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies. Perhaps he did say screwed some guys over, and also "you got a car here," so the police also showed up. More than one thing can, of course, be true. It's interesting. Then he says, detective chased, hard to tell, into the woods. And this is if the detective sound is made by Brandon. It's hard to tell because it seems like someone saying detective or protect yourself is speaking at a distance from the phone, unless Brandon turned his head away from the phone. Like, if he's in a panic state, there's a lot of stuff going on, he turns away to say detective, then he turns back mouth to the speaker to say chased. I suppose that's a possibility. Please hurry. Now let's run that again as if we are more calm. 911 emergency. Yes, I am out here in the middle of a field. State police cars pulled someone over on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. You have 1 car here, and the detective ran into the woods. Or the detective chased some guys into the woods. Please hurry. Then I hear, wait, I actually just ran into him. Detective has got the first guy. Then she says, do you need an ambulance? While she says that, Brandon says, I have rights. I assume the guy who shot him shook his head, no. Brandon was responding, yeah, to him. Then, no, I need the cops to the dispatcher. Wait a second. This individual is hearing, I have rights, that Brandon is saying. Let's see if I can hear that.
Okay, now run that round.
We're not talking to him. I tell you, ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
That's the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the...
Do you need an ambulance? Do you need an ambulance? Do you need an ambulance?
Wow. I almost hear I got. Now, the original poster that the audio guy that analyzed the call for 10 hours, he's stating it sounds like a low, gravely African-American male voice, and he has no idea what he says, and he believes there's 4 words. I did hear something got, possibly I got, and then I can't hear the other word. And it sounds like Brandon is talking, but he's talking away from the phone, so it might not have been another guy, or there might be overlap of yet another guy talking. But if Brandon turned away from the phone to say, I got rights, is he talking to some kind of rogue detective or state trooper? Did he call the cops on the cops? And if Brandon is the one saying detective, or another guy there detective, or if he's turning his mouth away from the phone, would that sound like a different person? And then there might also be another person there. I don't know. This is a very interesting theory, though, Because if Brandon Lawson did indeed say, I got rights to somebody, is he talking to a police officer? Or someone impersonating a police officer? Let me reread this latest comment that I was reading before. Then I hear it. Wait, I actually just ran into him. Detective has got the first guy. She says, do you need an ambulance? While she says that, Brandon says, I have rights. I assume the guy who shot him shook his head. No. Brandon was responding, yeah, to him. And then, no, I need the cops, to the dispatcher. Now again, someone in a panic situation, you would need an ambulance also, but if someone's trying to kill you in that moment, your ambulance is probably going to be the last thing on your mind because you need somebody to help you survive, like a police officer. So he might just be focused on that, especially if he's in a panic state. Would he say, no, I need an ambulance? Yes, of course I need an ambulance, but I also need police to arrive. If he's just thinking he needs cops, he'll just say cops. Now let's put this into perspective. Let's say the detectives Brandon is talking about are not that at all. They are impersonating an officer. Or is it a gang that has fitted an old Crown Vic with lights? Brandon would have no way of knowing these people were not police. He calls them detectives. I would call a plainclothes officer getting out of an unmarked car with flashing red and blues a detective. I would call an officer in uniform a cop. Play the conversation in your head now without breaths, in more complete sentences and thoughts. Yes, I am in the middle of the field. State police car pulled some guys over on both sides of the car. I'm only here because I ran out of gas. You have one car here. Detectives chased someone into the woods. Please hurry. While the dispatcher asks him to run that by her again, he runs into someone who he thinks is a cop. I'm talking to him, referring to who he thinks is a cop. I actually ran into him. Brandon seems relieved for a second. Detectives got the first guy, he says into the phone, which brings the attention to Brandon. I have rights. Brandon tells the person who he thinks is a detective. Then Brandon says yeah to the detective and no, I need the cops, to the dispatcher. Okay, this is quite a mind-shocking theory and also heartbreaking at the same time, because if there's some kind of, let's say Brandon ran into some drug dealers or whatever, and then either people and criminals impersonating police officers or detectives in an unmarked vehicle, or possibly crooked detectives as well. The thing is, if this was maybe some kind of undercover operation or something, detectives are chasing guys into the woods, he's calling the cops because he needs more police. Did he know they were? He might not know exactly what's going on, obviously. And then if he runs into people impersonating a police officer or detective, he thinks he's okay at that moment. Then he realizes that something is wrong. Is that when he whispers crap? Again, I do not hear the crap, but again, you guys can listen to it, see what you hear. But regardless, he stops talking while still being on the phone. And then if there's another really loud gunshot at that point that was edited out for whatever reason, is that the situation that happened? It kind of sort of makes sense. This person has theorized that Brandon's irregular breathing in the panic state is what's causing the weird pauses, and then also the low quality of the call, and also if the signal is going in and out. So perhaps it wasn't edited, and it was the breathing that was disrupting it all, or maybe it was also edited to cover something up, if indeed some corrupt law enforcement are responsible, or for other reasons that we don't know about. So, yeah, very, very mind-shocking. Let's go over a couple more theories. I think it's possible the guy in the background is on the other end of the call. Someone who is familiar with the area claims what sounds like gunshots is the sound of a truck going over a bridge in the area. For Brandon to hang out in the area long enough for his brother to get there is very odd. It's also weird that Brandon called the cops but then wouldn't come out from hiding when they arrived. Was he hiding from his brother? The cop that was there never mentioned there was a 911 call. Did he know about it, or was he only there because of the call made about a truck broke down on the side of the road? How much time went by from the 911 call to when his brother showed up? I still think Brandon wanted to talk to the cop. I also think it's possible Brandon told his brother to run because he didn't want him to know he had called 911. I find it hard to believe Brandon met with foul play at the time of night, especially after the cop showed up. About a year ago, Brandon's ex went to court and won a case against Brandon for back child support. How could that be? By now, Brandon could be declared dead. Why hasn't anyone done that? And so these are comments on the Mindshock podcast, YouTube comments, and I'll be getting into the most mind-shocking theory yet. But just a quick point on this one. Do we have anything other than Kyle Lawson's word to corroborate what Brandon told him about the cop? Like one time run and where's your pride, mother expletive? Who said that that's how the conversation went down other than Kyle? Who said Brandon Lawson was even still alive at that moment and that he was hiding there? There were some marks nearby, and that's how law enforcement supposedly theorized that he was there at the time of the call and he saw the officer. What if that's not true? What if Brandon was already met his demise at the time of the 911 call? And he wasn't there. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Now, that doesn't mean that Kyle is responsible for something. He might be innocent, but he might think something else went down other than went down with other individuals that he may be afraid of or whatever. He was involved in drugs as well. He did prison time. So this is somebody who's interacting and intersecting with other shady individuals. So do we have any corroboration of that Brandon saying, making that reference to one time run from the cop, whatever? Or if so, is it some kind of a ruse and Brandon suspects Kyle is involved in some kind of attack on him and he wants to get him away from the officer and he wants to get to the officer? And it's rough. If he somehow got away from the first situation, is it possible that he did encounter the officer later and then we don't know what happened? I mean, there's so many unanswered questions, but let's get to the most mind-shocking theory of all, if that wasn't mind-shocking enough, regarding the issues with the phone call. So again, this is another YouTube comment on the Mindshock podcast. Thursday night, when Brandon was out there supposedly, Kyle called that Chris guy that Brandon got meth from on Wednesday, and he went back out there with him. My theory was if somebody was with Brandon, it was Chris. That's who he was getting meth from. But I still think that call could have been staged. And before we get to all the issues with the call being staged, let's examine this. The last known person that Brandon might have been with was Chris. If him and Chris went somewhere, if the 911 call is not staged and Chris is there with him and something happened, Brandon met his fate, Chris somehow didn't and left, if Kyle's the good guy here, he suspects what's going on. He goes to get Chris, and they go looking for Brandon and can't find him, and Chris is playing stupid the whole time. Is that another possibility? Did Brandon pick up Chris and then encounter other individuals? Now, Chris may have also not necessarily set Brandon up on purpose. There's different scenarios there. He might have simply got away without helping him in a cowardly fashion, or it might be some kind of a setup. We don't know. Kyle may or may not also be involved in that setup. Another thing that's interesting is in other reports, supposedly they just said Kyle may or may not have had friends when he went to look for Brandon. And another point, is there any verification that he really ran out of gas, though? Because if this didn't happen when it was said to have happened, and there's issues with the phone call, because Kyle said he put the gas back in the truck, and there's other issues. Supposedly, Kyle got direct deposit at midnight, so he wouldn't have had to wait to get the funds. I don't know what the issue there is, or if there was some delay, or whether he really had the money. And did he put gas in the truck whenever? Or was there gas already in the truck and he just made up the story about bringing the extra gas can? Again, I'm not saying anything is true or untrue. But let's continue here. So the call could have been staged. That could be a recording of Brandon playing with his kids. That protect yourself, simulated gunshot, and the I've been shot could be a kid's laser tag toy. Laser tag helmets make those kinds of statements, or was it one of the property owners that shot him for being on some land that Brandon wasn't supposed to be? And he's jumping all over the place with the comment, and this comment's a little all over the place, but would that explain Brandon's apparent lackadaisical fashion? Was this call somehow spliced with other things? And we'll get to that in a moment. Or was it one of the property owners that shot him for being on some land that Brandon wasn't supposed to be on? I don't know why you would leave your truck if your brother is on the way. The fact that he doesn't come out, like, what are you going to do? Stay out there? You can ride back with your brother. That's why my mind tells me the call itself is staged, and that's why Brandon keeps talking even when the operator asks him to explain, and they put the truck out there, and Brandon was never there. Him and Kyle got into a fight because my theory is Brandon was supposed to get some with Kyle too. That's why he kept calling him He kept calling him first the 2 days, asking him where he is. When he finally gets back that Thursday, he is fighting with Ledessa at the house, and Kyle comes over to calm him down. Something bad happened. Meth makes people violent, and all of them were doing it. That could have happened around 5 or 6 p.m. Thursday, and they took 7 hours or more to set this up, and then staged and made the phony 911 call, all using a video recording of Brandon playing with one of his sons. Ledessa says she had that recording on her phone. She says she recorded it when the cops played it for her, but did she already have it beforehand? Now, there's a lot of information there. I don't know how much of that is corroborated with this, but I mean, it wouldn't be that surprising that Ledessa had a video of Brandon playing with one of his kids. Now, the question is that same audio in some of the videos of Brandon playing with his kids, is that what was used to stage this phone call from Brandon Lawson's phone, which they had, and Brandon Lawson actually met his demise earlier under other circumstances and was possibly never at the truck? I don't know. And if police suspect that maybe Ledessa or Kyle Lawson had something to do with this, I mean, I don't know how they would have handled that situation. Would they probably wouldn't go public and say, oh yeah, this 911 call is staged. But on the other hand, how come the 911 dispatchers as of yet unidentified to this day? And what is all the secrecy surrounding the trucker who called 911 about the truck? And I would assume that law enforcement would have alibis for Kyle Lawson for X amount of period. Now, when was the last time Brandon was known to be alive? So did neighbors see him arguing with Ledessa? Did they see him leave in his own truck? Is there any verification of any of this? I would think there would be. But again, with a lot of these unsolved cases, you really have to go back to square one, and you really do need to start with the individuals closest to the missing person, because most of the time they're responsible. That doesn't mean it's Ledessa or Kyle, but perhaps one of the drug dealers he was associated with. All of these people need to be looked at, and we can't really take anything at face value that cannot be verified or corroborated definitively. So, hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the Mindshock podcast in the Brandon Lawson series. We actually have even more to go over regarding various theories and other law enforcement issues. So there's still more to go over. As always, if you find the podcast interesting and want to help support Mindshock, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. You could also go to youtube.com/Mindshock or youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime. Hit that like button, share this podcast across social media platforms, keep up awareness in this case, as well as other missing persons and cold cases and wrongful conviction cases, all of which we cover on Mindshock. Share this podcast across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time. If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description. Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You're listening to the Brandon Lawson series. This is episode 3, Resolution. We are going to examine the latest information in the Brandon Lawson case and whether or not closure and resolution is coming. Clothes found, remains found. Is it really Brandon Lawson? And what explanations do we have for this timeline of finding the evidence and why it wasn't found before? As always, if you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting and informative, want to support Mindshock, get more mind-shocking content out there, both to bring awareness to true crime cases, missing persons, as well as various topics not discussed in the mainstream with logic and reason at the forefront. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier, so you can support Mindshock that way. Also, if you want to become a YouTube member, we have started YouTube memberships for those who want to be privy to members-only content on YouTube and advanced conversations in cases and topics that are for the next level listeners who are familiar with the basic information in various cases or topics, and that way we don't have to go over the basics and we can focus on higher level conversation. So you can become a Mindshock YouTube member today as well. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, so we've gone over the tape, the 911 call tape. Very curious. I mean, there's a lot of information there. Some still believe that it was a manufactured tape and that it was actually crafted by the parties responsible, possibly individuals close to Brandon Lawson. But this was posted today, February 4th, 2022, on the Help Find Brandon Lawson YouTube page it says it's by Help Find Brandon Lawson. I'm assuming this is run by LaDessa, Brandon's partner, so this is what it says. To all the members of the Help Find Brandon Lawson page, first and foremost, I want to tell each one of you that I appreciate all of your support, kind words, prayers, assistance, concern, and love that has been given to me and my family over the course of the last 8.5 years. Being Brandon's partner in life and knowing him, I know that he would feel hallowed knowing that so many people took the time to share his story. It is deeply appreciated and has helped our family in so many ways to find comfort. Answers are something that we have searched for, and today I'm sharing with you that we now have some of those answers. It is with a heavy heart and great difficulty that we have an important update regarding Brandon's case. Our family's long-awaited journey to find answers draws near. For years, we have gone to great lengths to search the area of Brandon's last known whereabouts. Many searches have been conducted in various ways to locate any potential clues. We have had a circle of supporters assisting us in locating Brandon throughout the process. Recently, one of those advocates led a small search party in the vicinity of Brandon's last known location. The search team came upon some clothing that were consistent with Brandon's clothing. Authorities and local law enforcement were contacted and were able to take the evidence in for testing. The Texas Rangers conducted a search that ultimately led them to discover human remains in this area. Although DNA tests are needed to confirm identification, it is in our hearts that we know that it is Brandon. Our main focus throughout this entire ordeal has been to bring Brandon home so that he can finally rest in peace and our family can have the answers that we have prayed for. I know that many of you will have questions, but at this time we do not have those answers. We will keep everyone notified of all new developments. I ask that you please respect our family's privacy at this time while we wait for results. Brandon's parents, his children, his siblings, his family, and I thank you for your unwavering support over the years in helping to find Brandon. Okay. She names all of these people, thanking them for their help and support, the private investigators, and all supporters that we appreciate all your dedication and tenacity through this entire journey. Lastly, Brandon will forever remain in our hearts of all who loved him. We are extremely grateful that we can lay him to rest and our family can have peace knowing he is home. Our love for Brandon will get us through what is yet to come. All our love, LaDessa and family. Okay, so just to recap here, apparently there was a new search party in the vicinity of his last known whereabouts. If they were truly his last known whereabouts, again, I don't know how to determine that definitively, but this new search found clothing consistent with Brandon's clothing. So now, from reading this, consistent with Brandon's clothing doesn't necessarily mean Brandon's clothing. And these remains, again, the DNA tests have not been performed or concluded as of this writing. So this is all unknown. So it could be somebody else. It's been 8.5 years. The area has been searched many, many times. Now, obviously, in quite a bit percentage of cases, remains are found that in areas that were previously searched. So this is nothing new. This doesn't mean it's not him. It could be him. Again, DNA tests will be done. When they confirm it's him with conclusive evidence, not these lower percentages of DNA confirms, but let's assume latest DNA testing technology relatively accurate, unlike previous generations. Although who knows, in the next generation we might find out that this generation of DNA tests was not as accurate as purported, and history repeats. But let's just assume for the moment that the DNA tests are relatively accurate. If it is him, does that mean he was there the whole time? Because, again, yes, in certain percentage of cases, remains are found in areas previously searched, but also, in a certain percentage of cases, bodies have been brought back to locations, and that doesn't necessarily mean they were killed at that location, but maybe they were. The body was moved, then brought back. But all of these searches, there's a lot of curiosities regarding the searches. Because in the neighboring areas, there were certain areas of land that were not allowed to be searched. Some believe they were connected to law enforcement, possibly even a sheriff in the area. I think that's what was reported online. I don't know if they actually did the searches for the deeds for those for the plots of land to definitively verify that. Apparently, some people did. They said they did. This was posted online, of course. Again, this is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So whether or not, I mean, if it was a common name as well, it could be somebody with a similar name, not necessarily the sheriff. I mean, there's endless variables to explain that it doesn't have to be police corruption, of course. But if it was, that would explain a few things as well. I mean, this is a relatively unusual case. That's why it's gotten so much attention. We also have to find a way to explain away why these highly trained canines did not find his body in all these numerous searches in the same area. So let's go to missingbrandonlawson.com for case questions. I don't see a post date for this, but all the responses, the immediate responses are April 24th, 2014. So it would seem that it was posted around this time, clarifying certain issues in the Brandon Lawson case. So let's go over this. Brandon was last seen when he left his San Angelo home 11:53 p.m. August 9th, 2013. He called his brother for help after running out of gas, Highway 277, near Bronte, Texas. When his brother arrived, there was no sign of Lawson, there was no damage to the vehicle, and his keys and his cell phone were gone. Brandon phoned 911 that night, telling dispatch he needed help. There has been no activity on his bank accounts or his cell phone since that time. He has a wife and 4 young children who need your help in bringing Brandon home. All right, another point here, again, vehicles being abandoned and abandoned not by the missing person is relatively common in true crime cases. So to just assume that he was the one that left the vehicle where it was found, I mean, that's nothing more than an assumption. Again, there have been many, many cases where a killer has left their victim's car abandoned elsewhere, not at the point of abduction, not at the murder site. So again, we have to keep this in mind. It's almost astounding how many so-called true crime aficionados just simply don't keep that in mind. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened or didn't happen, but again, if you're not new to true crime cases, you have to keep that in mind. So let's continue here. Misleading media report. Online news article written by Mrs. McCutcheon, the wife of Sheriff McCutcheon. We've broken apart her report and added our own comments in italics. So her headline states, and of course that was another disputed issue, that this reporter, Mrs. McCutcheon, she's the wife of the sheriff. So if information needs to be controlled, I mean, can you say conflict of interest? Again, if they're all innocent, that's perfectly fine, but conflict of interest nonetheless, especially if they own property in the surrounding area of where he was last seen. Again, I'm not saying that's true or untrue. Her headline states, law enforcement concludes man not in Coke County. This headline is misleading and without basis. One cannot conclude because a body was not found in a specific area searched that the person sought is no longer in the entire county. And that's another curiosity, because if these newfound remains are actually Brandon Lawson's, how do you explain the sheriff's wife writing this report and these searches? I mean, are they all incompetent? I don't know. We're just going over information. Continuing on here. Members of Texas Search and Rescue and various law enforcement agencies began arriving last Wednesday evening for Thursday's massive search for Brandon Lawson. This latest search seems to stem from an incident which occurred just before 1 a.m. Friday, August 9th, 2013. It began with a 911 call about a stranded motorist just south of Bronte on Highway 277. Maybe, so was this really posted right? Was this posted closer to, so within a year or so, this breakdown was posted? Okay, but it's referring, of course, to all the way to the date of the disappearance. She did not elaborate that the 911 call was made by a motorist, from what his wife was told, a trucker who called 911 to report a truck parked in an unsafe manner on the highway. The driver was not in the vehicle when Chief Deputy Brandon Neal arrived just after 1 a.m. Actually, let me interject here again, because I don't know if we talked about this. Was Brandon Lawson the type of guy who, even if he ran out of gas, he would at least roll the truck off to the side of the road in a safe manner instead of letting someone else crash into it? Or, again, if you want to go with the theory that he was on drugs, he might not have been in his right mind to do that. But that's also an assumption. Or is it more likely that a killer hastily abandoning a vehicle might not care if they abandoned it in the most safe fashion? Okay, continuing on here, the driver was not at the vehicle when Chief Deputy Brandon Neal arrived just after 1 a.m. However, at this time, investigation has revealed that Brandon Lawson was hiding in the brush due to an outstanding felony warrant, watching Deputy Neal while speaking to his brother Kyle Lawson on his phone. Again, how many assumptions are here? This statement was according to now that was part of the media report. Here's their breakdown rebutting that. This statement was according to Brandon's brother, who was en route to rescue Brandon after he ran out of gas. Again, allegedly. The statement he made is confusing for a number of reasons. First, I believe this was his brother's opinion and not entirely factual. I believe he may have said this to cover for Brandon's absence from the vehicle, as opposed to Brandon told him on the cell phone he was hiding. If Brandon was afraid of his outstanding warrant for arrest from years earlier, why would Brandon himself call 911? All good questions here. All good questions. Why would Brandon himself specifically ask for law enforcement if he wanted to hide? Thus, this makes no sense. Additionally, the deputy at the scene did not tell Kyle that Brandon himself called 911. Surely, that would have heightened Kyle Lawson's awareness and fear that his brother had to be in some kind of trouble to have called 911. And that's a really good point. I mean, people involved in drugs, criminal activities, warrants, I mean, to call the popo, that's kind of like a last resort. I mean, that's something, they wouldn't do that unless they were really in trouble. That's a really good point. Was Brandon hiding out and then found himself in trouble after the deputy and his brother left the scene? The girlfriend of Kyle says Brandon placed a call to them and was incoherent, and all she caught was, "I'm bleeding." This also not reported in the details of the reporting to the public. Again, this is from the website missingbrandonlawson.com. Was it that Deputy Neal, who was dispatched, came due to the trucker's 911 call, and he himself was not aware that Brandon himself called 911 yet? Why wouldn't he have told Kyle that your brother called 911 unless he did not know? All good points here. All good points. Had Kyle Lawson knew that his brother made a 911 call himself, I believe the entire scenario would have played out differently on the night in question. Instead, Kyle and his girlfriend go back home thinking Kyle is just hiding out and perhaps his bleeding was from scratches in the brush, expecting him to be home in the morning and the two of them would laugh over his bad luck. No family was aware that Brandon was in distress with his clear, "I need the cops" call, including his "please hurry." No family was told that Brandon called 911, not even Ledessa. They found out when they saw it on a cell phone report. Why did the family have to tell the police after seeing cell phone records that a call was made for help by Brandon? Why was that also left out of this news report? Okay, this is crazy. I mean, this is just mind-shocking because do we have any other missing persons case where the family found out through phone records that their missing loved one was the one who called police and police failed them to inform them of a call from their missing loved one? I mean, this is insanity. And then, of course, you have the wife of the sheriff who's in charge of writing newspaper articles to control the narrative. Again, I'm not saying that she's dishonest. She might be 100% honest. But the conflict of interest is still there because if there's some kind of complicity on law enforcement or no law enforcement complicity at all, but they simply don't want law enforcement to look bad because they couldn't find this guy, he called 911, etc., and they try to downplay their incompetence even if they're not responsible for Brandon Lawson's disappearance. Either way, conflict of interest exists. Okay, clarification. Brandon's wife learned he called 911 while reviewing cell phone records on the Tuesday following his missing status while itemizing a detailed cell report provided by Verizon to law enforcement. This report showed more details, including text, than a phone bill that one would get on their own phone bill, which only shows incoming or outgoing. Either way, the police did not tell her. This is crazy. So, wow. Okay. Wow. According to Ledessa Lofton, no one has heard from Lawson since this time. The Coke County, and this is back to the article by the sheriff's wife. According to Ledessa Lofton, no one has heard from Lawson since this time. The Coke County Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with DPS and the Texas Rangers, has already conducted an aerial search and a ground grid search without revealing any clues to his whereabouts. So they have an aerial search, a ground grid search, and I mean, we're talking Texas Rangers, DPS, Sheriff's Department, various law enforcement and search and rescue teams. They didn't find any clothing or remains, and yet now it's found. I mean, this is a little strange. Just call me crazy, but it's a little strange. Okay, the clarification here. This aerial search was done using infrared, which would identify a heated body as in alive, and was done a number of days after Brandon went missing. Infrared is not going to pick up a non-heated body. Okay, so days later, this search was done. Now, would they, if it's an aerial search, would they not be able to see a body? I mean, this is the desert here. I mean, I guess unless it was under some kind of brush or something and hidden properly, but a grid search, an on-the-ground grid search certainly would reveal that. The article again, to rule out the possibility that Lawson had become lost in the brush and died, Coke County Sheriff Wayne McCutcheon approved a search using cadaver or human remains dogs. This search was scheduled for Thursday, October 24th, 2013. That is kind of crazy, though, because he goes missing August 9th. He's last seen August 9th. And this cadaver search is done October 24th. Wow. Either way, still, of course, they would still find remains, but it's just crazy that, and why didn't they? And what are the remains there now? They just weren't found by all these dogs? Members of Texas Search and Rescue provided 6 human remains dogs. So we're not talking about 1 or 2 fallible dogs here. We're talking about 6 dogs. So are these just the 6 most incompetent dogs? I mean, what's going on here? Handlers and flankers, in addition to numerous support and logistics personnel for this search. According to Greg Piles, Tex SAR Chief Executive Officer and Incident Commander, Texar expended approximately $25,000 for the search. So this isn't some, little hinky-dinky search with just a couple people. It's a $25,000 search. And this isn't the only search either. This is the October 24th, 2013 search. There have been many searches since. Texar is a nonprofit organization completely supported by private and corporate donations. This group only conducts law enforcement approved searches. Texar uses math and science based upon information provided by the family to determine the size and area to be searched. The organization has a great track record with a 95% success rate. Okay, so these are not schmoes. 95% success rate. That's pretty darn good. Their findings and reports have been proven accurate and stood up under scrutiny when used in court cases. Texar's team included officers with Texas Division of Emergency Management, Centex Search and Rescue, and the Louisville Police Department. They also brought in 2 game wardens with Texas Parks and Wildlife. Incident Commander Greg Pyle's resume lists several federal law enforcement positions. Okay, so these are a whole bunch of different individuals with seemingly high competency levels. So this was not a search done by just like 1 or 2 head guys and just 1 or 2 dogs. This was an extensive search. The Texar canines are highly trained. These HR dogs will not hit on varmint carcasses. However, dead hogs sometimes prove a distraction to HR animals. Each handler wears a GPS device which provided Brandon Goring, Operations Section Chief, an extremely detailed analysis of all areas covered. The search was extended to the northeast following 1 HR dog showing slight interest. However, even with the extension, the search revealed no sign of Brandon Lawson. No remains, no clothing, no wallet, no cell phone, no keys. Let me read that again. No remains, no clothing, no wallet, no cell phone, no keys. So this new search, was it done in a repeatedly searched area? Or it says in the vicinity of his last known whereabouts. So it's not like he wandered somewhere so far that wasn't searched before. According to Ledessa's statement here on Facebook, it's in the vicinity of his last known disappearance. So is this on a section of property belonging to the sheriff that was never allowed to be searched, and now it was searched for the first time, and it could be described as in the vicinity? I mean, these are all questions that need to be answered. We don't have the answers here. So criteria here. The criticism here, according to Brandon's wife, it should be noted that following this search, a cell tower notating a last ping was approximately 3 miles away from the truck in an area not yet searched. So, okay, so had that area been searched since? So this is the 2013 search. Following a conversation with Sheriff McCutcheon and Ranger Nick Hanna, the investigation will turn elsewhere and will not include any further searches unless new detailed information arises. The criticism here, the sheriff and ranger are both aware of the new details of the last cell ping being in an area further away. Now, which area vicinity is 3 miles in the vicinity? I mean, I don't know. If there were areas not yet searched, they were searched for the first time 8.5 years later, but still in the vicinity, that could possibly explain the new information. But again, we don't have those details. Another curiosity here from Lost and Missing Incorporated, which posted on this site. It was publicly reported by law enforcement that Kyle was seen filling the gas can at 7 a.m. It was also publicly stated that Kyle and oil field workers searched for Brandon. As for all night, I don't know what he considered all night. Huh. I mean, that's information, but it doesn't necessarily help us that much. An interesting post by Axe Kicker here, September 14th, 2017. How the police could hear this call and not rule foul play tells you everything you need to know about what Brandon saw, and what he says he saw is true. He saw a state trooper execute someone he pulled over, and the fact that neither the police nor the private landowner will allow a cadaver dog or methane probe on the property tells you something else. That Brandon is likely buried on that land. The landowner has said he'd be willing to allow the search if the police say so, knowing they won't, since they killed Brandon. What else speaks to a cover-up? The edited phone call. Someone tried to edit Staper shot the first guy. They tried to cut the word Staper. They also tried to muffle the gunshots after the operator says hello. It's highly likely the police on the scene are also the same trooper Brandon ran into. Does Chief Deputy Neal know the landowners? Does Chief Deputy Neal know the landowners? I bet he does. Real well. I have a feeling both Brandon's girlfriend and brother know what happened but are too scared to go public with what they know, and who can blame them? Brandon was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and these troopers know everyone in town. Interesting theory there. Again, if that is what happened, that would explain a lot of the oddities in this case. Again, I'm not saying that happened. I wasn't there. I have no clue. I'm not going to hallucinate likelihoods, what's more or less likely. Obviously, this kind of situation has happened in the past. Did it happen here to Brandon Lawson? I have no idea. And without knowing exactly where the remains were found and whether or not they were in previously searched areas, because would the police allow a search, if the police are responsible, hypothetically, why would they allow a cadaver search where they know the body is? So if they knew he wasn't in that specific area, they would have allowed the search there. But another curiosity, supposedly they did expand the search based on the interest of one of the dogs, according to this article. Again, this article from the sheriff's wife, so who knows? But if it was expanded in the direction they knew he wasn't, if they're complicit, again, in this theory of law enforcement complicity. I am not alleging the theory is true or untrue. Another post here by Unknown that's quite interesting. The deputy arrived the same time as the brother. Did the brother see him arrive? They made such emphasis in regards to the trucker calling in about an abandoned truck. Surely a dispatcher would send to the sheriff, but Brandon's call was placed either way. The calls go through a nursing home. Surely they would have added up the two calls because no official search was done until morning. And the brother and Ledesser reported it. It seems off that the sheriff turned up at the same time due to the trucker placing a call, sheriff's deputy rather. Was the trucker questioned? He'd had to have seen something if he drove past the truck. At one point, he would have been going the way Brandon went. Two calls were placed to dispatch. It isn't a big place. They were both placed within, say, 5 miles of the truck, so would go to the same place, question mark. Why was it never added up that the abandoned truck was the same stranded motorist that the dispatcher logged? I mean, yeah, these are good questions. I mean, at that time, what is the normal volume of 911 calls in that area? Another theory, I'm not sure we went over exactly. An Unknown poster posted this, April 2019. I feel like he said, there's a psycho just pushed some guys over. Maybe as in pushed them over the bridge and then hid out under the bridge. That's how he saw the cop and his brother pull up. Just my opinion. Yeah, I mean, again, if this is not law enforcement complicity, mostly just law enforcement incompetence and the need to cover that up, was there a killer in the area? Did Brandon see something? Maybe he ran. That would justify calling the police, maybe. I don't know. Another theory here that hasn't really been discussed is the CI angle. I know CI angles are starting to be talked about more, but how many of these old cases was a victim a CI and it just wasn't known about? Because obviously that wouldn't look good. So more cases might involve confidential informants than people think about. So here's another post by Unknown, June 15, 2019 here. I hear in the middle of a deal, I think we just screwed some guys over. I think he was an informant, and these people he met found out. Only if he was an informant would he call the cops. It's been stated he was working on something to do about his warrant. Okay. Yeah, if he was a CI, and there was a deal gone bad, if he had a warrant, didn't like the cops, whatever, this would also explain why he would call the cops. I mean, there's a few different scenarios that could explain the call. Here's another post here, March 19th, 2019. I think Brandon was being chased. This is why he didn't notice he was low on gas. He was trying to get away from someone. When he ran out of gas, he may have thought he lost them. But he seen them coming up on him and got out of his truck and ran. One guy got out of the car to pursue Brandon while the others remained in the car driving along looking for him. The man caught up to Brandon and there was an altercation. Brandon got the best of him. This is why he says, I got the first guy. Then the car stops and the others get out. Brandon runs into the brush area, then comes out in a clearing. This is when he makes the 911 call. This is why he says there's one car here. I'm in a field and I'm being chased into the woods. Brandon turns back to see if they're coming, but continues to talk to the operator, which is why it sounds like someone is in the background. Brandon also stated he had cuts, which would make sense as he ran through all that thick brush. Brandon sees the men are still pursuing him, and this is where he turns and runs. You can hear the wind blowing into the mic on the phone before the call terminates. We know that Brandon is still alive almost 30 minutes after the 911 call because he is still calling his brother. Whomever was chasing him did not hang around long, as no other cars were seen on the road by Kyle or Deputy Neal when they went looking for Brandon. My guess would be Brandon ended up falling into the Colorado River, which would explain why the phone suddenly went dead. However, I have heard at the time that the river was very low, so it's anyone's guess. Interesting theory there as well. Was there some kind of a chase situation? But again, why wasn't he found with all of these searches? I mean, these are questions that need to be answered. And if this is his clothing found now and his remains found now, again, it may or may not be. May or may not be. I mean, did Brandon wear the rarest designer type clothing in the area that nobody else would have worn? Or did he wear, jeans and regular t-shirts that many other people wore? Who knows? I mean, I think as a blue collar worker, he probably wore the same type of clothing that most people in the area wore. So it's kind of hard to say that was definitively his clothing. But again, we'll have to wait for all the DNA testing. So yeah, there's so many questions in this case, and hopefully there can be closure and resolution. And if Brandon was met with foul play, obviously he deserves justice like anyone else does, and hopefully that can be found here in this case as well as all other cases. So we will be continuing to cover the Brandon Lawson case and all the latest updates in an attempt to resolve it. I mean, it's definitely a curious one. It's gotten a lot of attention. And like with a lot of these cases, I believe there should be enough information here if an independent investigation were to be done by outside parties, again, just to avoid conflict of interest. It's amazing how many people don't understand the concept of conflict of interest. Nobody's alleging that local law enforcement or even local Texas Rangers could be involved. It's just to have a completely outside neutral agency, not from the area and not compromised, that would just guarantee an objective, neutral, legitimate, honest investigation. And that's what this case, as well as any other case, deserves and needs. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime in the Brandon Lawson series. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help support the channel, donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can become a YouTube member on the YouTube channel for exclusive access to members-only content. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications for updates, and like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. You could also become a patron, support the channel that way. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.